all the students, parents, athletes, scientists, advocates, and all other malaria-fighting champions, welcome to the 2022 Leadership Summit, United to Beat Malaria. For those who don't know me, I'm Margaret McDonnell, the Executive Director of the UN Foundation's Nothing But Nets campaign. While I really wish we were all together in person, I'm excited to be your virtual guide today as we travel to hear from global health experts, health workers, and advocates who share a vision of a malaria-free world. Speaking of world, I want to acknowledge that the past 2 years have been extremely challenging here in the United States and around the world between the COVID-19 pandemic, heart-wrenching examples of racism, discrimination, and inequities in public view, and now, of course, the devastating attack on the people of Ukraine. It's especially important in times like these to care, to be educated, and to act. I find inspiration in a quote by James Baldwin, a brilliant author and activist ahead of his time. Quote, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced," end quote. And so today and every day, we come together to face the harsh inequities that malaria reflects and to work to change them. As for today, we're joined by more than 500 people from 34 states across the US, from Washington to Mississippi, and 53 countries around the world, from Albania to Zimbabwe. We're joined by members of our partners, such as ASTMH, Junior Chamber International, Malaria Partners International, and Rotarians Against Malaria Global. We're joined by advocates based in malaria endemic countries, scientists, and private sector partners working on the latest innovations, and health workers who are fighting malaria on the front lines. I'm so inspired by the unique and vital contributions that each and every one of you brings to this global effort. So the theme of our summit is United to Beat Malaria. Pretty catchy, right? Well, we have a big announcement, so please take a look at this short film.
Malaria is the deadliest disease in human history. Today, half the world's population remains at risk. But there is good news. It is preventable and can be eradicated within our lifetimes. You can be part of the generation to beat malaria for good. Over the past 20 years, the world has made incredible progress, cutting the malaria death rate by half and saving more than 10 million lives. The UN Foundation's United to Beat Malaria campaign, formerly known as Nothing But Nets, is proud to be part of this global effort. Since 2006, we've helped protect more than 40 million people from malaria in more than 50 countries. And our champions have successfully advocated to their members of Congress for increased investment in life-saving malaria programs. But this collective progress is at risk. Although many countries are close to wiping out the disease, progress has stalled in sub-Saharan Africa, where the malaria burden is greatest. The COVID-19 pandemic has created even more disparities and threatens to leave those most vulnerable even further behind. Today, a child dies of malaria nearly every minute. Malaria also disproportionately impacts pregnant women and communities most affected by poverty, displacement, and climate change. This is a historic injustice. But it does not have to be this way. Can we be the generation to beat malaria for good? It won't be easy. It will take more innovation, political will, resources, and partnership across sectors. We all have a role to play. Anyone can be part of this global movement. To be the generation that beats malaria for good, we need you. Make your voice heard. Raise awareness and raise funds. Advocate to your elected officials. Activate friends, family, and colleagues. Working together, we can achieve a malaria-free world. Will you join us? We are united to beat malaria.
So hopefully you caught that we've officially changed our name from Nothing But Nets to United to Beat Malaria. We're so excited to be joined by champions from coast to coast to celebrate this exciting milestone. So here we are, we're joined by our watch parties. All right, represent, this is great. So I think we're gonna start with East Coast, watch party here, Allison and team. How are y'all feeling? Woo! Oh my gosh, well, you know, we've put in a lot of work to pull off this summit and our brand change. So kudos to all of you and all of the team. It's really great to see you. Hope you all are feeling good. Now, hey. All right, now we're going to travel halfway through the country to the Midwest to Springfield, Illinois, joined by the JCs of Illinois. How you doing, Jenna and team? Awesome. How are y'all feeling? You good? Amazing, good. Well, you know, JCI, I have to say, you all have been one of the most important advocacy partners we've had. You've been with us for many years, advocating across the country. So kudos, thanks so much. We're really grateful for the partnership. Thanks for being with us today. And now we're going to go to a mystery watch party. I'm not sure where they're calling in from, but let's take a look. Let's see. Oh, hey, how are you all? Oh, good. Oh, well, clearly they're excited about our new name. Wow, really celebrating. Okay, where are you all calling from? No, nothing. Okay, they're too excited. They're so into this. All right, well, maybe we'll come back to you all later, okay? So now we're going to go. They were really excited. Now we're going to go to our West Coast party. How are you going, Nicole and your friends? How are you guys doing?
Hi, Margaret. We're doing great. We're super excited about the brand name change, but we have a question. Why did we decide to change the name?
That's a great question, Nicole, and thanks for asking it. It's a big deal to change our name after 15 years is nothing but net. So I'll give you a few reasons. To start, well, we initially really primarily provided bed nets. We've realized that really you need a comprehensive suite of tools in the fight against malaria to make sure you protect the most vulnerable people, from spraying to treatment, diagnostics, and the training of health workers. So while bed nets will continue to be absolutely critical, they're not all that's needed in the fight against malaria. So we wanted our new name to reflect that. Secondly, we wanted our name to reflect you, our diverse array of amazing champions and partners. Together, we've built the world's largest grassroots network of malaria advocates committed to achieving a malaria-free world. And last but not least, we believe that beating malaria is way overdue. Our campaign has contributed to a remarkable period of progress over the last 15 years. But today, a child still dies nearly every minute from malaria. Malaria is the oldest and deadliest disease in human history. The world has managed to eliminate it in the United States, Europe, and most of the quote-unquote developed world. It's unacceptable that children and families in sub-Saharan Africa and parts of Latin America and Southeast Asia have to worry every night about getting sick or dying from a mosquito bite. COVID-19 has shown us what's possible when political will, science, and resources come together. The time is now to expand access to malaria interventions, build partnerships across borders and sectors, and continue to galvanize champions committed to being the generation to end malaria. Our new name, United to Beat Malaria, reflects both the urgency of the moment and the optimism that together we can end the historic injustice of malaria in our lifetimes. With that, I'd like to thank our summit sponsors, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, SC Johnson, and Vestergaard. We're so appreciative of their generous support and partnership, and we'll hear from them later in the program. I also want to share sincere gratitude to Aptiv, Bayer, and SC Johnson, who have signed on as foundational partners as we embark on this next chapter as United to Beat Malaria. I'd also like to thank all of our major donors, particularly Dr. Simon Estes, a world-renowned opera singer who's raised more than $500,000 to protect children from malaria, as well as the Benito and Francis C. Gagin Foundation, who have contributed nearly $700,000 and will be offering a $100,000 match for all donations between March 21st through World Malaria Day, April 25th. And thanks again to each of you, those of you who have been with us for many years, to those of you who are joining us for the very first time. Before we jump in, I want to quickly share what we have on tap for today. Today, you'll hear from global health experts and innovators. You'll meet heroic figures on the front lines, and we'll hear from advocates about why they're united to beat malaria. We'll also have some fun surprises along the way, including trivia with prizes led by our very own Mozzie the Mosquito. So make sure to pay attention. We want to hear from you and for this to be as engaging as possible. The United to Beat Malaria team is on hand, so please use the chat feature now to say hi and let us know where you're joining from. Throughout the program, you can share your reflections in the chat and use the Ask a Question feature in the portal. Also, please help us keep the conversation going. Make sure to follow United to Beat Malaria's new social media channels on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook to like and share content. And please create your own content. Just make sure to tag us and include the hashtag #BeatMalaria. My colleagues will share a link to our social media toolkit in the chat now. So what does it mean to be united to beat malaria? It's people from around the world coming together to solve one of the greatest challenges of our time. As you can see, there are many critical pieces to the puzzle. Each of us have a role to play in this global effort. We're united with kids and families in malaria-endemic countries who face a threat of malaria every night. We're united with health workers, scientists, private sector partners, policymakers, and advocates, all working together towards the ultimate goal of beating malaria within our lifetimes. Throughout the program, we'll highlight each piece of this puzzle. What is that 8th puzzle piece, you may ask? Well, you'll just have to wait and see. For now, let's introduce the first puzzle piece, the family. The most pressing priority in the fight against malaria is reducing malaria deaths in young children and pregnant women who are particularly vulnerable to this disease. Today, a child dies nearly every minute from malaria, but we can change that. Our next session, United to Protect Kids, focuses on the latest tools and strategies to reach the most vulnerable families and prevent malaria deaths in early life. We're honored to be joined by UNICEF's Global Malaria and Health Partnerships Advisor, Valentina Buch, and Cynthia Yu, UNA USA Youth Observer to the UN. Cynthia is a student studying international affairs at George Washington University, and she's the 10th UNA USA Youth Observer to the UN. Cynthia brings nearly 7 years of experience as a leader at UNICEF USA, where she has spearheaded national initiatives promoting civic engagement, leadership development, and diversity to over 30,000 supporters. With that, over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And hello, everyone. I'm Cynthia Yu, and as Margaret said, I serve as the U.S. Youth Observer to the United Nations, a program of the UNA USA. Today, I'm so honored to join Valentina Buch to discuss UNICEF's work in combating malaria worldwide. Valentina Buch is the Global Malaria and Health Partnerships Advisor at UNICEF HQ. UNICEF is arguably the most well-known agency in the UN and works in over 190 countries to save children's lives, defend their rights, and help them fulfill their potential from early childhood through adolescence. Valentina has worked in malaria for over 20 years and has spent much of her time on the front lines working in endemic countries such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, Kenya, Angola, and Madagascar. Since 2008, as a part of UNICEF, she has supported countries in the development and implementation of their malaria programs, including those funded by the Global Fund, from net distributions to integrated community case management to the development of supportive community and primary healthcare systems. Prior to joining UNICEF, Valentina worked for the WHO's Global Malaria Program, the International Rescue Committee, IOM, and UNDP. She's currently also supporting UNICEF as one of the officers in charge of the Health and Emergencies and Humanitarian Settings Unit. Valentina, thank you so much for being here. And I just want to reiterate how I was fangirling the second I found out we were doing this interview, because I have been following your work ever since I was a high schooler supporting UNICEF.
Really?
Yeah, and so it is. So it feels so amazing to be able to meet you even virtually,
wow.
and to do that, and to do this. So thank you so much.
Oh, that's really sweet. Thank you. It actually, when Margaret made me look at my bio, I was like, oh my God, I've been doing this for 20 years. All these folks, I'm still a spring chicken. When did that happen?
I'm going to start with the first question to just ask. My understanding is that WHO's 2021 World Malaria Report showed that more kids under 5 are getting sick or dying from malaria than we realized. Can you provide a high-level overview of malaria's impact on children and how COVID-19 impacted our progress?
Of course. So in effect, the World Malaria Report 2021 did have a recalibration of the numbers through a more accurate methodology, which showed that the burden of malaria in children had been underestimated to date. So malaria now accounts for twice the percentage of deaths in children under 5. We went up, unfortunately, to 8% of global overall deaths. If we put this into numbers, it means that there are nearly 480,000 children dying every year from malaria. That means that 76% of the total deaths are in children under 5. The 241 million malaria cases that were estimated in 2020 is the same figure as 2000. So it looks like we've gone back 20 years. And we are also, unfortunately, back to the figure of one child dying from malaria every minute. COVID-19 contributed to an additional 14 million malaria cases and nearly 70,000 deaths. 2/3 of these were due to service disruptions in healthcare delivery. We saw a 12% increase in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of deaths from malaria. The COVID pandemic has been punitive on children. We've seen massive disruptions across the board. In 2020, schools for more than 168 million school children were closed for almost a year. And a November 2020 report projected that the number of children living in monetary poor households would increase to 140 million around the world. In 2020, we also saw an additional 6 to 7 million children under age 5 suffering from wasting or acute malnutrition, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa or in South Asia. The problems of rises in malnutrition contributes greatly to child deaths. There is, however, some good news. The recalibration in the methodology has increased the number of lives saved due to malaria control to 1.7 billion cases. 10.6 million deaths globally were averted between 2000 and 2020. Most of the malaria cases and deaths averted over the last 20 years were in the WHO Africa region. We also saw that even with COVID, 72% of the LLAs that were meant to be delivered were actually delivered to people who needed them. We also saw 33.5 million children receive seasonal malaria chemoprevention, which is a preventative treatment given in advance or during the malaria transmission season. And we got some great news on the malaria vaccine. One is already ready to be rolled out in the coming years, and new ones are coming into development, even learning from the COVID-19 vaccine development. For us, controlling malaria infection is incredibly important because malaria infection increases susceptibility to other infections. So eliminating malaria will have higher effects on reducing all-cause childhood mortality, and we have to continue to keep up the fight against malaria. The children in the future are counting on us.
Wow, Valentina, that is so incredible. And I mean, just hearing about all the great work UNICEF is doing, I know that back when I was with UNICEF USA, one of the things that shocked me was that UNICEF is the largest purchaser of vaccines in the world. So it's really great to hear that they're working on vaccine distribution for malaria. And I'd love to hear too, Valentina, can you share an overview of what UNICEF and its partners are doing to combat mortality and morbidity, specifically among kids under 5 and pregnant women?
So for us, United to Beat Malaria has been one of our greatest champions. You know, they've really supported us through so many different projects in so many different countries. They have been really an incredible support by the contribution of nearly $22 million in the last 10 to 12 years. It has helped our country offices to really deliver on the front lines, and especially in complex operating environments. So for us in UNICEF, malaria is of particular importance because it is the 3rd largest infectious disease killer of children, right behind pneumonia and diarrhea. Malaria affects pregnant women. Each year, approximately 125 million women living in malaria-endemic countries throughout the world become pregnant. An estimated 10,000 of these women and 200,000 of their infants die as a result of malaria infection during pregnancy. Malaria is a disease of poverty. It affects the most poor and can also drive families into poverty. It is also a disease of war and famine. Children who are malnourished are far more likely to catch and die from malaria. UNICEF thus works across various areas. We work in health, nutrition, water and sanitation, education, health system strengthening, and many others to ensure we are bringing a comprehensive and holistic package of services to children, and especially ensuring that the most vulnerable are at the forefront of receiving assistance. We work in LLIN delivery. We work in ensuring children and pregnant women have access to preventive treatments. We also ensure that they have access to treatment and diagnosis when they are ill through a comprehensive package of supporting primary health care at community and at facility level.
That's really amazing, Valentina. And kind of hearing these stories, I know that this can be really intense and heartbreaking work. So, can you offer an illustrative, hopeful example of an impactful program you've worked on and what's possible when malaria is reduced or when we eliminate malaria in a community or country?
So I think one of the really great examples has been actually in Niger, where we're seeing that whole swaths of the country don't have children who are infected with malaria. And this is part of a continuum of care that we've seen. So one of these examples is if you put in prevention, be it through LLINs or through something like seasonal malaria chemoprophylaxis, you ensure that children in particular are not being infected. They aren't being bitten by mosquitoes, or even if they are being bitten by mosquitoes, they're fighting off the infection through the application of this preventive treatment. When we see that, we reduce the reservoir. So it's this cumulative effect of if you don't have the malaria parasite in your bloodstream, or you can't infect others through when you're bitten by a mosquito, you have less illness. Less illness means children can go to school. When children can go to school, they become more productive adults. When they're not sick, their parents don't have to take money out of their pockets to get them health care. And so they can continue working, so they can also have a productive and economic livelihood. So we see that when you put together seasonal malaria chemoprophylaxis, LLIN distributions, you ensure malaria prevention is on the rise. And even if you do get infected with malaria, you have good access to diagnosis and treatment through something like integrated community case management, which is looking at malaria, but also pneumonia and diarrhea and malnutrition. When you do this continuum of care, you have healthier populations. You have health populations where parents can work, who become productive adults. You have children who can go to school so that they get good education, and they can also then contribute to their economy growing and becoming more productive. So really, when we look at this continuum of care and we reduce malaria, we reduce and we increase overall health for populations and countries at large.
That's absolutely incredible, Valentina. And I love that you touched on more than just global public health, but also just how important it is to protect children and empower families too. I think it really goes with all the SDGs in that they're so interrelated. And SDG 3 directly impacts children's access to education and other things as well. So thank you so much, Valentina. And I know that at my time with UNICEF USA, I saw that it can be incredibly challenging and inspiring and rewarding to do this work. So you've been in the malaria fight for nearly 20 years, and I have to ask what's been done or what it's like to do this work amidst a global pandemic, and now from the perspective of a mother of two as well.
So the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic has meant that I've started to have to fight two pandemics. You know, we're fighting now COVID-19 and we're fighting malaria. And as a mom of two, of kids who have been sent home from school, it's been trying to keep up their education, try and keep up their scholarity. They are reservoirs of infection. So recently, my little girl did bring home Omicron, and so I also went down with COVID, and had to keep fighting malaria because it was such an important fight for me. Both my kids were actually born in Kenya, so it's always been this incredibly strong impetus that on the day they were born, there was a whole cohort of kids who would have to fight now malaria and have to fight COVID-19. The fact that every time they got sick, every time they got a fever, we've had this incredible access to good health care, that I've been able to get them an RDT or a PCR for COVID, so I would know exactly what was causing their infection, and I could have good access to drugs and make sure that they got better and they got better quickly, has been really important. Unfortunately, this isn't the case around the world. There are so many children who are right now having to fight that dual pandemic. Their parents are having to fight their dual pandemic, becoming ill themselves, be it from malaria or COVID-19. I really like what Peter Sands said last year. COVID-19 has made it all seem like we live in a malaria endemic country where we can be infected at any moment. So I think right now, as a mom, as a fighter of malaria, it's an incredibly important time that we have to be united to beat malaria. It's the only way we're going to get rid of all of these pandemics. I met my husband in Kinshasa. We were at a Youth Endure concert, but he's actually kind of cooler than me. He's the UNICEF head of polio since December, and he's going to be the last head of polio, which is really awesome for our family.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, but the poor little kids, I mean, can you imagine poor little kids? They've got the big polio malaria fighter, and they've got the only malaria advisor at all of UNICEF as their parents. So it's like, oh my God, you two never stop talking work, go away.
Yeah, I bet that they're very proud of your work.
I think that, it's kind of interesting. I mean, when you look at it in perspective, I used to be really proud of my dad. So, my dad was the head of the fifth committee. I actually went to the UN when I was 3 weeks old for the first time in a basket. I guess maybe around Lena's age, so about 3.5. I think somebody apparently asked me, what does your dad do? And I go, he sits and he talks. And you really want to talk about full circle? Because now the kids have asked, what do your parents do? And they go, Mama sits and talks to the computer. Every so often, like last year, they came on to watch me with Peter Sands because they were very excited. They were like, Mom's on TV, Mom's on TV. For me, it got personal once I had a kid, because now anytime a mom loses a kid from malaria, that could be Teo, that could be Lena. Like they now have names. They have names to me. And that has become really important, and it gets very strange when you're doing this fight from Geneva, from New York, because you can't go to the field anymore. And it became so much more important to empower the people who stayed, everybody who stayed in Kinshasa, everyone who stayed in Abuja, everybody where it was actually really scary, because even for us, I mean, when they closed the border here, I live in France, they closed the border, our hospitals in Switzerland, and suddenly you did feel like a refugee. You suddenly did really feel what it was like not to be able to access healthcare. It gets really personal at a certain point. And I would think Peter Sands was spot on. COVID-19 threw us all into what it's like to live in a malaria endemic country because you can get sick at any moment. You could barely prevent it. And you didn't know where to go. You didn't know what to do.
Thank you so much, Valentina. And I mean, I just want to emphasize how much of an honor it is to be on this call with you because you've been working on this for so many years and you've dedicated your life to ensuring that children around the world are protected from malaria. So it means so much to me to be able to be on this call with you. And I just really appreciate it. And Valentina, I know that many of the people who are participating in this summit will be meeting with their policymakers. What gives you hope and should give all of us hope that we will continue making progress towards a malaria-free generation and world?
So you're right. I mean, in the last nearly 2 decades that I've been working on malaria, we've seen the advent and increase of incredible new tools. We saw long-lasting insecticide-treated nets come on board and become widely used. We saw artemisinin combination therapies also come on board and be widely used. We saw the little tag kits that now everyone's sort of used to in terms of how we use RDTs that we're having used for COVID. Those were a massive innovation when we could start putting those into the hands of community health workers. So when we started 20 years ago, everyone talked about malaria is preventable and curable, but we're actually making that a reality. And what gives me hope is the great excitement right now around the malaria vaccine. This has been 20, 30 years in production, and it's now actually going to be rolled out against all the different countries where we can provide it. It's a really exciting time. And if you look at what has happened, the mRNA vaccines that have been produced for COVID-19 have now taught us that we can do similar things for malaria. So we're really pushing the envelope in research and diagnostics, and we're really doing the best that we possibly can, leveraging the learnings from so many different diseases to fight malaria and to do it with the best tools possible. We're also learning we've got to work more closely together. Another really great advent of things that have happened in the past couple of years is learning how to use where, for instance, immunization programs know that they are getting zero-dose communities. Those who don't get immunization are also those who aren't getting malaria interventions. So we're learning to work better with each other. Especially right now that we have so few contact points to diagnose, be it COVID-19 or malaria, we're working better together. And the more we can work better together, we can actually beat COVID and we can beat malaria.
That is so inspiring, Valentina. Thank you so much for your remarks and for your time. And thank you for being a champion for global public health for children worldwide. I just really appreciate all that you do for UNICEF, and it's just so admirable. So thank you, Valentina.
Thank you. Well, you've got the platform. I mean, like I said, I've been with the UN since I was 3 weeks old. So that's 44 years of knowing what it is. And it's young women like you who are the future. They are the platform. And you've got the platform now. You've got an amazing voice. I've seen your poise on camera. I think you're going to change the world.
Thank you so much. That means so much coming from you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Valentina and Cynthia. It's inspiring to hear about all that's being done to protect children and families from malaria. And these efforts are not just saving lives, they are preserving bright futures, the next generation of doctors, lawyers, and leaders in communities around the world. So for our next puzzle piece, we're highlighting the next generation, kids like Gift, who's featured in this next film produced by our friends at the President's Malaria Initiative.
Iyi ni nyanja ya Tema Malawi. Uyu ni muzi wanga wa Katumba. Ine ndine Gift. Banja langa ndimasewera uko. Ndimakonda dera la kwathu. Ndikadzakula ndifuna ndizikhala polisi. Koma usiku kumakhala koopsa chifukwa cha uzuzu, kachilombo kofalisa matenda amalungo. Malungo ampangisa kuti munthu anjenjemere, kutuluka thukuta, komanso kufowoka. Kumatha munthu kujomba kusukulu chifukwa cha malungo. Zandichitikirapo ine maulendo atatu, zimatha kuwachitikiranso anthu ambiri. Zimenezo ndi zinthu zopsa kwambiri kudwala malungo. Kumano panopa abweranso ampupira waja kuchokera kwa azathu aku America. Zovala za anyamata ampupira ndi zokongola. Nyumba yathu anayipopera ndipo zuzu yonse inaferatu. Ndipo chaka chino sinadwalenso malungo. Ndikumatha kupita sukulu opanda vuto ina liyonse. Sikwambu kwambiri!
What a cool film. Thank you, PMI. And let's give a shout out to Gift. He's such a star. In just a few moments, we'll get to hear from PMI and Global Fund leadership. But before we do, I want to invite you to join the conversation in the chat and on social media. And don't forget our new handle and hashtag. Thanks to all of you who have already been active on social media, such as MBA Cares, Valentina Boo, Winter Akuth, and Adrian McCord. So for our next session, United in the Fight, we look forward to hearing from two esteemed leaders about how the Global Fund and PMI work together. Peter Sands, the Executive Director of the Global Fund, and Dr. Rick Steckty, Deputy Global Malaria Coordinator at the U.S. President's Malaria Initiative. Peter and Rick will be answering questions submitted by our champions. But first, I'd like to briefly provide some background on both of them. Dr. Steckty is a medical epidemiologist with over 30 years of public health experience in infectious diseases and is an internationally recognized expert of malaria. He has lived and worked in Africa, the Caribbean, and Southeast Asia, served as CDC's malaria branch chief and director of PATH's Malaria Control and Elimination Program before joining PMI in 2018. Peter Sands was the CEO of Standard Chartered PLC, one of the world's leading international banks, before becoming executive director of the Global Fund. Peter has been a research fellow at Harvard since 2015 and has long been an advocate for the importance of investing in global health security and pandemic preparedness. Under his leadership, the Global Fund had its most successful replenishment yet in 2019, something many of you successfully advocated for. All right, I'm excited to hear what questions our champions have for Peter and Rick.
Hi, I'm Jessie Elliott from Seattle, Washington, and this is my 5th Leadership Summit. As we know, the Global Fund and PMI both play important roles in the fight against malaria. But to help kick us off, can you give us a brief overview of your organization's historical roles and footprints when it comes to fighting malaria?
Thanks, Jesse, for that question. And it's always great to begin on the sort of where did we come from venue. As the President's Malaria Initiative, this was obviously started as a presidential call with George W. Bush leading this in 2005. and then resources being put on the table in 2006 with the engagement of 3 sub-Saharan African countries. By 2017, the total of our engagement with specific countries of 24 in sub-Saharan Africa and 3 in the Greater Mekong subregion. So the resource base followed this, that is about $30 million at the outset in 2006, and we're now operating with more than $750 million a year with all of the 27 countries. And PMI presents a relatively unique donor model. That is, we both provide financial resources to the countries that we partner with, as well as a team from USAID and from US Centers for Disease Control to work day to day in direct contact with the National Malaria Control Program on technical and programmatic aspects of malaria. Peter will obviously speak to the Global Fund, but for every country that we work with in PMI, they also work with the Global Fund. So thanks for that opportunity.
Well, just adding to what Rick said from a Global Fund perspective, to start with, what is the Global Fund? The Global Fund to fight HIV, TB, and malaria was created 20 years ago to fight what were then the world's 3 deadliest infectious diseases: malaria, HIV, and TB. And we raise about $4 billion a year from donors to fight these 3 diseases and deploy the funding through grants to over 120 low and middle income countries. And over that 20-year period, these programs we support have saved over 44 million lives, an extraordinary number. On malaria specifically, the Global Fund provides about 56% of all international financing, about $1.3 billion a year. Working together with PMI, the Global Fund has helped countries make an enormous difference to the course of malaria. If you look at the countries in which the Global Fund invests, which includes those PMI is active in, malaria deaths have dropped by 45% since the Global Fund was founded in 2002. But we are at a bit of a crossroads right now. After years of steady declines, actually, malaria cases and deaths are on the rise. That's partly due to COVID-19, but also due to gaps in funding and increasing drug and insecticide resistance. So this is a particularly important moment in the history of the fight against malaria, which still kills far too many, 627,000 deaths worldwide in 2020, mainly young children under 5 or pregnant women. It's a critical moment in the fight. And the 2 organizations which are providing most support, the vast majority of the support to countries in fighting this disease, are PMI and the Global Fund.
Hi, I am Obedru Tebuka from Yucaipa, California. As I understand it, this is a really critical year with the US hosting the 7th Global Fund replenishment this fall and PMI recently releasing its 2021-2026 strategy. My question is, how do the US government's investment in the Global Fund and the PMI complement each other, and how do they support or enhance other US investment in global health? Thank you.
Thank you, Ovid. That's a great question, and you've hit the nail on the head. 2022 is going to be an incredibly important year in the fight against malaria. For the first thing, we need to get back on track after the disruption that's been caused by COVID-19. But also, it's the Global Fund for Replenishment, where we raise money for donors to fund the next 3 years of the fight against malaria, as well as for HIV and TB. And it's an important year for PMI with their new strategy, which Rick will talk to in a moment. In terms of the Global Fund replenishment, we're absolutely thrilled that President Biden and the United States are going to be hosting our replenishment conference in the fall. And there we will be looking to raise a very substantial amount of money to resource the fight against 3 diseases. And that money is critical. We have not made it the progress we wanted to make against malaria over the last couple of years for the obvious reason that we've had many services, health services, overwhelmed and strained by COVID. So we need to make incremental investments and extra effort to get back on track to ending the epidemics by 2030. In fighting malaria, the Global Fund works hand in hand in very close collaboration with PMI, whether it's in distributing insecticide-treated mosquito nets, in enabling community health workers to test even in the most remote places and to provide therapeutics, to provide treatment to those who get infected. And that collaboration is central to the fight against malaria. We need to work together in a seamless way to support countries as they combat this disease. I'll hand over to Rick to talk about 2022 in the context of PMI.
Thanks, Peter. You set this up beautifully, and I'll just point out that from the very outset, PMI and the Global Fund have been communicating closely, both on the investments as well as on decision-making that goes on with national programs and countries. We, PMI, absolutely need the Global Fund hand in hand with us. No one organization can do everything that needs to be done, and we all need each other. We've been complementing each other's investments over the course of 15 years or 16 years now, where in one country, it may be that the Global Fund is supporting mass distribution of nets that year, and PMI is supporting routine distribution to cover the changes that occur at the local level. One place it might be rapid diagnostic tests paid for by the Global Fund and the drugs paid for by PMI, and in the next country, it might be completely the opposite. So a lot of this has been the flexibility of our two organizations and our connectivity at country level to make this happen. So the other thing that I'd like to highlight is that we've not just been doing malaria, we've been building the systems, whether it's the planning across the health sector or it's certain systems, and I'll highlight 3. One is the supply system, in order to get those products out to where they need to be so that people can have access and use. The second is the human resource system, which is critical, and we're recognizing that even more and more in our strategy in the coming years. And the third one is on the information front, where again, we share both with the country and critically with the Global Fund, all of the information that we get, and we get all of the information that the Global Fund gets. And so I think it's been a remarkable partnership over the past 16 years.
Hello, my name is Dr. Monica Sahani. I'm currently based in Charlotte, North Carolina. We all have seen how the pandemic has affected hospitals, health workers, and services in the United States. I'm curious to hear how COVID-19 has impacted the ability of countries to implement malaria programs, such as bed net distributions, treatment, and case management. I'm also curious to know what special measures did your organizations and partners take so that you could continue reaching as many people as possible and avoid the worst case scenario. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Monica, for that question. As we know, COVID has taken up all of the oxygen in the room. This has affected every country and every local setting. And there is both good news and bad news. That is, WHO estimated that all of the gains against malaria control could be lost if indeed COVID disruptions essentially undid the expected malaria prevention and care and treatment services. Well, that didn't happen, so that's the good news. Yet, in the 2021 World Malaria Report, we see an additional 70,000 malaria deaths occurring above and beyond what we had been tracking, and that 2/3 of those can be attributed to the disruptions from COVID. Back to the good side again, a lot of the work we do in prevention is built around long-term planning. So our insecticide-treated nets, indoor residual spraying campaigns, and our seasonal malaria chemoprevention programs actually went off quite well in the scheme of things. As a matter of fact, in this past year, PMI completed every one of those campaigns. There were a few delays, but they all reached the populations that we anticipated. The care and treatment side has been the one that's challenged. And that is that health workers were fearful at the outset. They didn't know what they were facing with febrile illness coming into their centers. Patients were afraid of going to health facilities because they heard that health workers were getting sick. There wasn't personal protection everywhere. There wasn't safe water supply, the necessary soap and water. And this was challenging. Over the course of 2 years, this has obviously gotten better, but there is no question that there has been disruption at the health facility level and out into the community in terms of our ability to provide the care and treatment for febrile children at risk of severe disease and death. And so that goes back to those attributed cases of additional deaths related to COVID. So maybe with that, I'll turn it over to Peter for his thoughts.
Thanks, Rick. And first of all, we realized pretty quickly in this pandemic that it was going to have or could have a pretty catastrophic knock-on impact on malaria, HIV, and TB. And so we created a COVID-19 response mechanism known as C19RM to help countries both mitigate the impact on HIV, TB, and malaria programs and actually respond to the pandemic itself. And C19RM has become the largest provider of financial support to low and middle income countries for everything except vaccines. So tests, treatments, PPE, urgent enhancements to health systems, and so on. And we provided about 4.2 billion. In helping countries adapt malaria programs, we've worked incredibly closely with partners in country, with PMI, and there's been some remarkable real-time innovations and adaptations that enabled, as Rick said, campaigns to continue. So one example was a shift from doing centralized distribution, so taking a truck with a whole lot of bed nets and taking it to the village square, having everybody gather to take their bed nets. Obviously, that didn't work very well in COVID. And so we shifted to a model of door-to-door distribution. And we also helped ensure the community health workers providing the case management had the PPE they needed to carry out their work. As Rick said, in fact, mosquito net campaigns proved remarkably resilient. There were delays, there were a bit of disruption, but actually the number of mosquito nets distributed in 2020 actually increased by 17%. But case management, the ability of overstretched community health workers to diagnose and treat promptly all the people that they see, the ability of supply chains to actually deliver all the commodities that are required in situations of acute stress in the health system has been tested. And that's why we have seen more deaths. So we do have an urgent requirement to get back on track. Our base case wasn't to be flat. Our base case was to be making progress against malaria, and we've got to resume that progress.
Hi, I'm Adriano Schneider, and I am tuning in from Los Angeles, California. As a follow-up question, how are malaria programs, including those supported by the PMI and the Global Fund, contributing to the COVID-19 response and helping countries prepare for future pandemics? Thank you.
I think this is one of the big lessons we've learned from COVID-19, which is that the infrastructure, the capacity, the experience of fighting the diseases that are already there has proven to be incredibly valuable in fighting the new pandemic. So when you look at how lower middle income countries have responded to COVID-19, what you see is that it's the supply chains put in place to fight malaria, the laboratories used to diagnose malaria or TB, the disease surveillance systems that we use for tracking malaria, and vitally, the community health workers who are the front line in so many parts of the poorest parts of the world. They have been not just continuing to provide support in fighting malaria, but they've been the front line in detecting, responding to COVID-19. As we think about the future and pandemic preparedness, we shouldn't be thinking of it as something distinct, a separate silo, but in essence, an extension, an expansion of the capabilities that we've helped countries build to fight the diseases they face right now, such as malaria, by being smart about adding multi-pathogen dimensions so that we invest not just to fight malaria specifically, but we train lab technicians or community health workers to detect, for example, other causes of childhood fever and be able to respond to those. So I think if we are deliberate and intentional, we can help countries simultaneously be more effective in the fight against the diseases that are killing people now, such as malaria or COVID, and make these countries more resilient and able to respond to future pathogens, future infectious disease threats.
I couldn't agree with you more, Peter. The pandemic came on top of diseases that were already wreaking havoc on populations. But maybe most importantly, and again, this is probably one of the big pieces for our PMI strategy going forward, is the attention to the health workforce. Those health workers don't do just one disease. And we've been faced with the fact that whether it's the oldest pandemic, that is malaria, or the newest pandemic, COVID, we need the systems in place, and in particular, both the good planning and the good supply systems, but we need the health workforce to be fully supported. Some of that has to do with making sure that we have health workers where they're needed, selecting them properly so that they're the ones that will be revered in the community and followed, build their skills across our diseases, HIV, TB, and malaria, but now additional pandemics, supplying them, supervising them, and paying them. So that's an infrastructure that's absolutely critical.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am from Bellevue, Washington, home of coffee and clouds. This is my 10th year of advocacy with Nothing But Nets, and all throughout the year, we talk to our members of Congress about the importance of ending malaria and programs that fund the ending of malaria. If you were in our shoes, what would you say to your members of Congress about the importance of supporting the President's Malaria Initiative and the Global Fund?
Thanks for that question, Ashley. First of all, I would say that COVID has become so important these past 2 years, and it's not going away, that you should first and foremost lean in on COVID. And if we've learned something from COVID, we've learned that health security is absolutely critical to the security of global governance and the global economy. So getting it right in the face of COVID is important for not just COVID, but for every one of the pieces of our work in health across the board. And let me drive that home to say that, this pandemic of COVID came on as a febrile disease, and yes, with respiratory symptoms. But it presents into communities initially as fever, and so does malaria. And so our infrastructure to identify those fever cases, identify opportunities to test them, confirm the case, treat them, and then follow them up becomes the core of that platform that we'll need, and not just for COVID, but for the next pandemic that will come along, because it too will most likely present in this way. Ebola did with some additional symptoms. COVID does now. So this is our future.
I think my starting point, if I was talking to a member of Congress, would be that COVID-19 has given us all a little bit of a taste of what it's like to live under the shadow of a pandemic. And yet, this is what millions of people are experiencing every day because of malaria. It's the fear of catching something that might kill you or kill one of your loved ones. It's children missing school because they are sick. It's people being unable to work because they've got fevers. And this is happening in the tune of hundreds of millions of infections every year due to malaria. Rick spoke earlier about the fact that COVID-19 is our newest pandemic and malaria is our oldest. We should take COVID-19 as the impetus to finally finish off the oldest pandemic. Not just because it's been around too long and is still killing far too many people, but also because we know we can do it. Every year, more countries get certified as being malaria-free. This is a beatable disease. A couple of other things I would just emphasize. First, the partnership between PMI and the Global Fund is a well-established, truly remarkable partnership with a track record of delivering success. Second, the Global Fund model in conjunction with PMI is a very powerful model of leveraging US taxpayer dollars. For every US dollar that goes into the Global Fund, $2 come from other donors. And it's not just that, because the Global Fund operates with co-financing requirements that oblige the implementer governments themselves to put their own money into the fight against malaria. So again, maximizing the impact of every one of US taxpayers' dollars. But really, the underlying point is, this is a disease that is killing over 600,000 people, mainly children under the age of 5 or pregnant women, every year, and that we know how to beat, and we've proven we can eliminate in country after country after country. Isn't now the moment to actually get rid of it, to free the poorest communities in the world from a disease we know how to beat?
We are dealing with diseases that knows no borders. We are dealing with diseases that knows no borders.
Let's
diseases that knows no borders.
Hey, Mozzie, how's it going? So you were Nothing But Net's mascot for like 15 years. So how are you feeling about the change?
Were? What do you mean were? I am the Nothing But Nets mascot.
Oh, did you not get the memo? No one told you? We actually changed our name to United to Beat Malaria.
Are you kidding me? You're just gonna swat me out of your life just like that?
Mozzie, take a breath. It's okay, chill. We want you to come with us on this journey. And it's not that hard. We just have to make a few adjustments here and there, okay?
Okay.
So stick with me. Let's do this. Okay. How about let's start with the hat. Whoa, wait, no. It's upside down. I don't know what happened. Ah! Oh, perfect. It looks great. Check it out. Well, you can try it yourself. There you go.
Wow, that was easy.
Right? Not so bad. Okay, well, let's make it official. Let's do this. And voila, there you are, United to Beat Malaria.
All right, I'm gonna go spread the word. Back in a buzz.
Have a good trip.
Parlez-vous mosquito? Now that's a great wall. New York, New York.
Mozzie, where have you been? I was worried about you.
I flew all over the world telling people about United to Beat Malaria, and now we need to share our experiences to all of our followers on Instagram.
Absolutely, let's do it.
Say United to Beat Malaria.
United to Beat Malaria. Wait, Mozzie, you're supposed to be live with trivia. Yeah, good luck, have fun.
Okay. Hi, champions. Welcome to Trivia with Mozzie Mosquito. Get out your phones, either go to kahoot.it or open the Kahoot app on your phone. The pin is on the screen. Let's play. Well, I'm gonna need these. All right. Where it says nickname, enter your first initial and last name so I know who to fly the prize to if you win. The prize for first place will be a $50 gift card and a bag of United to Beat Malaria swag. So I see some people joining us. We have a lot of folks joining us. We have Carson, I see Taylor, Andrew, David. Wow, so many folks want to play trivia with us today. That is great. We are so excited to get started. Remember, you can enter this code in your mobile app or on kahoot.it. There's also a trivia tab in your event center. Just enter this code right here on the screen. We'll get started in just a few moments. Wow, look at all those folks who want to play trivia today. That is wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, Renee. I see Kelly. I see Caleb. Bella, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you've been paying attention because all of the trivia questions are based on the content that you've seen tonight. All right, we're going to get started. Let's begin. And remember, folks, this is a game of speed, so answer as quickly as you can. Let's get started. We're going to start with a simple fill in the blank, just as a practice question, and you better get this one right. Together, we can blank malaria in our lifetimes. Is it beat, end, eradicate, or ignore? Let's see, 10 seconds. I see lots of answers coming in. We are at 30 already. You folks are excited about trivia tonight. And let's see what the correct answers are. As you might have guessed, we want to beat, end, or eradicate malaria. All of these answers are fantastic. We do not want to ignore malaria. Let's look at our leaderboard. I see Pabs is on top. Congratulations, followed by Nicole, Malaria Stop It, the Illinois JCs, and Ashley. Great job, everyone. If you're not on the leaderboard yet, don't worry, it's not too late. We've got 4 questions left. Question number 2. Which of these interventions are used to prevent malaria in children? Is it insecticide-treated bed nets, seasonal malaria chemoprevention, the malaria vaccine, or all of the above? What do you think? We've got about 5 more seconds left to answer this question. Get those responses in, guys. And let's see the answer. Many of you have guessed correctly. It is all of the above. All of these interventions are important in the fight against malaria and to prevent malaria in children. Great job. Let's take a look at that leaderboard. Okay, we still have PABS on top holding their reign, followed closely by the Illinois JCs, Ashley, Bella, and Nicole. Great job, everyone. Question number 3. The countries in which the Global Fund invests have reduced malaria deaths by what percent since 2002? Is it 15%, 25%, 35%, or 45%? What do you think it is? We've got 10 seconds left. I see those answers coming in. By what percent has the Global Fund, the countries in which the Global Fund invests, reduced malaria deaths by since 2002? 26 of you got this right. It is 45%, an incredible impact from the Global Fund. Congratulations to everyone who got this correct. Let's look at the leaderboard, see if there's any big shakeups. Okay, we still have PABS reigning supreme. Great job. Followed by Ashley, Malaria Stop It, Nicole, and the Illinois JCs. You're all doing a fantastic job. 2 more questions left. According to the WHO, COVID-19 contributed to how many additional malaria deaths in 2020? Is it 13,000, 38,000, 47,000, or 96,000? What do you all think the answer is? 5 seconds, and let's see the right choice. 16 of you guessed this correct. This was a tough question. The right answer is 47,000. Great job to those of you who guessed correctly. Let's see the leaderboard. Wow, a massive shakeup on the leaderboard. We have H. Opperman all the way to the top, followed by Caleb, C. Bray, Andrew, and Jay Berry. Great job, everyone. Love to see you guys advancing in the leaderboard. It is time for the last question of this round. What does Gift, the young man featured in the film we showed earlier, want to be when he grows up? You had to be paying really close attention to get this one right. What do you all think? We've got 10 seconds to get those answers in. Everyone type as quickly as you can. Okay, let's see what the right answer is. Ooh, okay, I see some of you have gotten this correct. We've got 11, 12, 13 people who guessed police officer correctly. Great job, folks. That was a really tough question. Now, to the podium. In 3rd place, we have Joshua. Congratulations, Joshua. You were in 3rd place, followed by Andrew in 2nd, and number 1, we have, drumroll please, H. Opperman. Congratulations. Great job. You're all superstars. Thank you to everyone who played. If you're bummed out that you didn't win, don't worry. I'll be back to play another round of Mozzie Trivia with more prizes on the line. For now, let's hear from a few more champions about why they are united to beat, well, me.
I am united to beat malaria because as a survivor, I want to see the youth live out and enjoy their childhood and get the opportunity to follow their goals and dreams as they get older.
I'm united to beat malaria because it is preventable and curable. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense that in this day and age, we can't get a bed net over every child that needs it. We can't get drugs and diagnostics to every child, every pregnant woman, and every father who needs them.
I'm Davis Smith, the founder and CEO of Cotopaxi, and I'm united to beat malaria because I believe that every person deserves the right to live a healthy and fulfilled life. Cotopaxi is committed to do our part as we work together with Nothing But Nets to fight this treatable and preventable disease.
Hello, My name's Apetrida Paul, and I'm from the United Republic of Tanzania. I am united to beat malaria because malaria affects young people the most, their education, sports, and general health well-being. Join us and be united to beat malaria once and for all.
The Global Fund is united to beat malaria. We're united to beat malaria because it's time to beat the world's oldest pandemic. It's time to beat the pandemic that kills far, far too many young children and pregnant women across the world. It's time to beat the pandemic we know how to beat.
That was so inspiring. Thank you all for sharing your passion and commitment. And we'd love for each of you to record your own I'm United to Beat Malaria Because video message about why you're passionate about this cause. You can take it on your phone. It should be no more than 15 to 20 seconds and in vertical orientation. The upcoming break would be the perfect time to film a message and engage on social media, along with stretching your legs and grabbing a snack. If you post a video, we'll give you a shout out during the program. And guess what? I've just heard that we're going to receive a very special message from someone who's a pretty big deal, the President of the United States, Joe Biden. We're going to share his message with all of you later in the program, so please make sure to stick with us and stay engaged. But before the break, let's check in with our live watch parties, and we'll see you back here at 5:30. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. Have a great break. See you back at 5:30.
Be sure to buzz on over to our social media pages under our new handles, @BeatMalaria on Twitter and @UnitedToBeatMalaria on Instagram.
Wọ́n bínú orí ni ẹ̀kọ́ pé bóyín máa lò. Ẹ̀nànú fẹ́ ní lójú ọ̀ ata ló fi sẹ́nu. Ẹ̀nànú kí ni lẹ́yìn ẹ̀kọ́ ló fi sọ̀rọ̀. Wá tó bá ẹ̀jẹ̀ lẹ́yìn ayọ̀ máa fẹ́ ní fọ̀rọ̀. Òyà gbé sí wọn létí kó jẹ́ kó rí gbọ́ pàtó ti dé. Wọ́n jẹ́ kó rí gbọ́ wà lọ limit mà ló ṣeré. Àsìkò wà lóde ọba tí wọ́n rí kẹ́sà májú. Àlàtà máa jọ pẹ̀lẹ́ yan dúdú a máa jọ. Bàkúrúmọ́ 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 ìjọ tàtú mọ́dé. Bàkúrúmọ́ 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 bàbá tí bá wà ṣe. Bóyá ẹ̀dá ò láròpin yẹn ọ̀rẹ́ kò túra ká torí pé ní láwa mọ̀ kó sẹ́ni tó mọ̀ la. Ọ̀rẹ́ tó bá dára fún rẹ̀ kó rántí pàdí ẹ̀. Àní tó bá jẹ́ kó dí ẹ̀ ọmọ máa pẹ́ pàdí ẹ̀ lọ́lẹ̀. Bóyá gbé sí wọn létí kó jẹ́ kán rí gbọ́ pàtó ti dé ọmọ jẹ́ kán rí gbọ́. Màá ló ṣeré àsìkò wá lóde. Àkàtà máa jó pẹ̀lú iyọ̀ dúdú a máa jó. Bàkúrúmọ́ 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 ìjọ tàbí mọ́dé. Bàkúrúmọ́ 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 bàbá tí bá wà ṣe. Tó tún kò dé. Òyà gbé sí wọn létí kó jẹ́ kó rí gbọ́ páyé gbẹ́gẹ́ o. Ọ̀rẹ́ ṣọ́ra fáyé o, ayé má ṣòro o. Tó bá ní gbàgbọ́ pé bàbá bẹ lókè kó má sóhun tó dùn tó. Ọ̀rẹ́ má jí sòro o. Àwọn tá ti rò pé kó lè júnà mọ́ àmọ́ ìlú ti yí padà bàbá ti gbé wa lékè. Ẹni táyé rò pé kò lè pàgọ́ rẹ̀ tó wá kọlà láàrin. Ẹ jẹ́ ká má jọ. Bàkúrúmọ́ 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 ìjọ tàbí mọ́dé. Bàkúrúmọ́ 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 bàbá tí bá wà ṣe. Bàkúrúmọ́ 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 ìjọ tàbí mọ́dé. Bàkúrúmọ́ 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 bàbá tí bá wà ṣe. Tẹ́ bá dé Amẹ́ríkà wọ́n ń jíjó wa. Tẹ́ bá dé ìlú Europe wọ́n ń jíjó wa. Ní gbogbo UK wọ́n ń jíjó wa. Tẹ́ bá dé ìlú Asia wọ́n ń jíjó wa. Tẹ́ bá dé ìlú Áfíríkà wọ́n ń jíjó wa. Gàgà nínú Nàìjíríà gbogbo ènìyàn wọ́n máa jó. Bàkúrúmọ́ 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 ìjọ tàbí mọ́dé. Bàkúrúmọ́ 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 bàbá tí bá wà ṣe.
Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a great break, got a chance to stretch your legs, get something to drink. We're now going to head to the front lines of the fight against malaria, where there are no shortage of heroic figures. From the mobile health workers going door to door, ensuring every household is protected from malaria, to the doctors and nurses who are treating life-threatening malaria cases every day. These healthcare heroes are the first and last lines of defense against this deadly disease, and their life-saving efforts go largely uncelebrated. So today, we thought we'd change that. Let's give it up for our Health Worker Hall of Heroes. Our first pair of heroes, Talatu and Lini, are mobile health workers. Armed with a smartphone, a megaphone, and vital malaria tools, they are the first and often the only link to malaria services in their communities. So let's first meet Talatu. Talatu is the only health worker in his remote village in southwest Niger, where malaria is the leading cause of death.
abanda ikanda safari ko an kafai ba kai jo kan bisa ce ta kiran safaron ko hande kulke ko wodi kunnan hemari zo duka zabu so raporo da boy gidi wodi kan hemari zo si bayitsi
wallahi go maka ne go sabu dai inda zan kai ga hamba no go sabu mo yi ko tara kan go kai suballa kula go gizai no bani igogo ta agogo tanga modi zai ba doro sambu yan wa amni bonza yise wata kulu igogo farhanda igogo makani da ya cine igogo ce cham koi be na mo am sie banda.
What beautiful sentiment. Talatu's work is clearly very much appreciated by his community. And now let's travel to Madagascar, where a tenacious volunteer, Lini Famanu, has helped reduce malaria deaths to zero in her community, with support from the President's Malaria Initiative and Madagascar's Ministry of Health.
Niezaky gnase na nentany ary nanao via de matetiky namangy satragno mihitsy gnase reo.
Lafa tsy eo madamo andesinao ianao dakoa.
Zay olo nanao TDR sy nanao ny nandeha namonjy ny tely na CT atoy hita zany fa tena nahomby. Zao aloha tena tiako asako toy. Tena hitako tena mahomby amin'ny vahoaka amin'ny morafeny toa zany di fandambesako asa toy. Na mihita zany fa tena niova zany gn'olo tena nampiasa mostikera amin'izao. Taminay morafeny toa nampisy titobo ty tsy nisy maro.
Wow, it's so impressive. They've had 0 deaths from malaria since the community health hut was created. Lini is rightly very proud of her and her community's efforts. Our next pair of heroes represent a critical facet of the malaria fight, maternal health. Pregnant women and their babies are particularly vulnerable to malaria, contributing to over 10,000 maternal deaths and 800,000 babies born with low birth weight every year. Olga and Victoria work to prevent these outcomes by providing bed nets, preventative treatments, and malaria education to expectant mothers as part of their prenatal care. Olga Pitor works as a midwife in the indigenous Huachipas community, located deep in the Ecuadorian Amazon. A malaria survivor herself, Olga makes sure every pregnant woman in her village sleeps under a bed net.
Nukunjanya ingyaran ma ochinja turanukui biak morinja enza wem taken ma vivu enza ya yowina he. Nuku ramar amokam tengya mashiram inya vinya naman cirsha uci cirsha mana mang cirishiram warish hatsuk nui metru rarat tinya ma vikya wakiru nuku ramar amokat tinya.
It's amazing to hear her dedication to reaching remote indigenous communities with little access to healthcare to ensure they have access to malaria prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. Now let's meet Victoria Momo, who supervises a maternity unit in a community affected by conflict. A decade-long insurgency crisis in Borno State, Nigeria has caused 40% of all local health facilities to shut down. As her caseload continues to grow, Victoria is determined to keep her clinic operating year-round.
The malaria this year was so much. We have, from our data, we had about 1,110 women that had antenatal. 480 were malaria positive. I think eliminating malaria will be, how will I say, it will be one of the best things that could happen in the maternity. I mean, not just in the community at large, and even in the maternity, in the ANC. So where malaria is not there, you see, these people will be stronger, they'll be able to go to do their day-to-day activities, the children will be stronger, go to the school.
It's so inspiring to see how, despite the significant challenges and considerable burden of malaria in Borno State, Victoria and others remain hopeful and working towards a malaria-free future for their kids and community. Our final hero, Juana Menjivar, represents a major milestone in the fight against malaria. Last year, El Salvador became the first Central American country to be certified malaria-free by the World Health Organization. At the center of this elimination effort are people like Juana, who has spent over 20 years tracking the spread of malaria in her community.
Yo, como colaborador voluntario, tengo 22 años. Siempre nosotros dándole seguimiento, porque nosotros como colaborador y como comunidad tratamos la manera de que esto desaparezca de aquí, porque aquí ha quedado aislado. Hay personas que sí, bien honestamente vienen y me dicen, mire, yo he estado con temperatura, o la niña, qué sé yo, hágame el favor de sacarme la gotadora, yo dejo de hacer lo que estoy haciendo y véngase y yo se la doy. Se la saco inmediatamente.
Wow, major congratulations to Juana and her fellow volunteers and colleagues who, through exhaustive, diligent work, helped end malaria for good in her community and in El Salvador overall. The goal and dream of every health worker and all of us who were united to beat malaria. Let's give a round of applause to these 5 health worker heroes and the countless others who are working on the front lines of malaria. So for our next session, we'll talk about some of the innovative new tools in the health workers' toolbox, including the first ever malaria vaccine approved by the World Health Organization. Throughout history, the world has been searching for the next great innovation in the fight against malaria. But what we've learned over the years is that there's no single solution, no silver bullet in this fight. We need a full complement of prevention, treatment, diagnosis, and monitoring tools to prevent malaria deaths, combat drug and insecticide resistance, and beat this disease for good. And so that brings us to our next piece in the puzzle, the scientist. We have 2 amazing scientists here with us today. Winter Akuth, a longtime champion pursuing her PhD, who has conducted research to advance malaria vaccines, and the UN Foundation's very own Dr. Tara Bracken, a former biomedical researcher who has studied malaria in pregnant women and children.
Hi everyone, I'm Winter Akuth, a malaria researcher and NBN malaria champion, and I'm also RBN Partnerships to End Malaria Youth Workstream co-lead.
Hi everyone, I'm Tara Bracken. I'm the Senior Officer for Malaria Advocacy and Communications at the United Nations Foundation, and I'm also the RBM Partnership Advocacy and Resource Mobilization Partner Committee co-chair.
And we're here to answer some of your questions today.
Hi, I'm Sifan Lucia. I'm a champion and I experienced malaria as a refugee. And I'm wondering how malaria elimination or prevention programs are developed and deployed in countries with conflicts and or displaced people. How are those populations being reached?
So that's a great question. The displaced populations are at increased risk of malaria for a number of reasons. They may be living in impermanent settlements that leave them more susceptible to mosquitoes as opposed to having closed walls. They may have decreased access to malaria services, for example, because of conflict settings or because they've left their homes and are no longer near their stable health systems. They may have had bed nets at home and they didn't have a chance to take them with them when they fled their homes. In cases where there's been natural disasters, sometimes they're at increased risk of malaria because mosquito populations have increased. And now we have outbreaks of malaria following flooding or heavy rains. So it's really important that we ensure malaria services are extended to displaced populations, that they're included in national malaria strategic plans and any programming that humanitarian partners are using. It's important that we include them in our disaster response plans because at the same time that you're trying to get people food, water, shelter, they're going to need some of these essential health services like malaria services as well. And this is particularly important for pregnant women and small children in displaced settings, the same way it is for any malaria endemic setting. They're at increased risk, particularly in these settings, and so we need to make sure that they're included in our planning and the delivery of services.
I agree with Tara's sentiments about this, and I think it is very important the role that organizations like Nothing But Nets, United Nations Foundation, and the partners, what they're doing, reaching out to people in displaced areas, because they are living actually, honestly, such an unstable life. And it would be nice to see that we do not have inequity to distribution of these tools, like insecticide treated bed nets, and that they have access to these tools to help them.
Thanks, Winter. It's also really important when we're talking about delivering malaria services to displaced populations that we remember that there's a very strong health equity argument to ensuring these populations receive services. It's right, it's just, it's fair. But it's also very practical. When you're trying to eliminate malaria, it doesn't make sense to deny services or leave out a population that are at very high risk of malaria and that are also traveling across borders. So they may go from one country to another, and so they're covered under different national strategic plans. They may be traveling from an area where they had really high malaria endemicity into one that doesn't have very high endemicity, and they might spark an outbreak. Or on the other hand, they may be coming from a place where they haven't experienced malaria before into an area where there's a lot of malaria. And so now these people are not, their immune systems aren't quite prepared for the onslaught of malaria, and they don't know how to avoid it. They don't know the proper prevention tools or techniques that people who grew up in an endemic area might already know from the time they were small children. And so it's really important, even from a practical malaria fight standpoint, to make sure that we're thinking about these populations and the unique risks that they're facing compared to some other folks who aren't in a displaced or an emergency setting.
And that's why I think it's very commendable, the work that Nothing But Nets is doing, reaching out and just trying to include everybody in this fight. So I think it's very important that even the governments, even in these displaced areas, they still have governments. And I think for their leaders to also step up and work together with all international organizations that are trying to do their best to make a difference. And if they find a way of collaborating with all these organizations to ensure that everybody has access to these tools when we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to say we have been seeing an increase in interest in the malaria community, the global health community, and implementing country governments in making sure that these populations are included in some of their programming. And now the next step is ensuring that the implementation is possible. So that's part of why partners like Mentor, who we worked with in Borno State to make sure that IRS spraying was available in some of these IDP camps. It's why their work is so important, because it's great that we plan, but now getting those tools to the people, that's another challenge, especially when you think about how complex some of these environments are from a safety standpoint, even, bare minimum. So this work is really critical to ensure health equity and that everyone is included in this malaria fight and no one gets left behind.
Hi, my name is Vanessa and I'm from Illinois. I'm also a partner of Nothing But Nets through JCI USA. I have been a champion for 5 years. My question is, can you explain the impact of insecticide resistance in the fight to end malaria, as well as maybe share if there's been any progress or innovation in the area? Thank you.
So the impact of insecticide resistance in the fight against malaria. I would say that the emergence of resistance to insecticides and anti-malaria drugs has been a huge problem, and honestly, it accounts for most of the global malaria infections that we see. And even though we've had these tools for decades now, for years, the parasite we are talking about, the malaria parasite, it's a very clever parasite and very hard to work with. And that's why it's been so challenging, even developing an effective malaria vaccine, even up to today, still working on it. So there's still a lot of research to go into trying to understand the parasite dynamics and how it interacts even with the anti-malaria drugs and the human body, and what are the tricks that it has, and what kind of products, scientists can come up with or develop. So that's still a big challenge, unfortunately, but hopefully there will be light at the end of the tunnel eventually, with all the innovations that are already on the ground in pipeline for that.
Yeah, and I would add that insecticide and anti-malarial resistance are two of the biggest challenges that we're going to face moving forward in the fight against malaria. And they're really the two of the big reasons why we need to continue to innovate and develop new tools, despite the fact that we have known, proven, effective, cost-effective tools. Because like Winter said, the malaria parasite is very tricky, it's very clever. And the mosquitoes too. I mean, they reproduce quickly, and so it's an evolutionary process that eventually resistance can crop up if we're not careful. And this could have a huge impact on the malaria fight. These vector control tools have been an absolutely critical part against the fight against malaria, and especially in the gains that we've made since about 2000. And so to lose the effectiveness of indoor residual spraying and of larviciding and of insecticide-treated bed nets, these have averted millions of cases of malaria, and they've helped save hundreds of thousands of lives over the last 2 decades. And so to lose them would have an incredibly negative impact on the fight against malaria. But we have a couple ways now that we're aware that resistance is a problem and that we know that they can crop up, how we try to avoid them. So the first is to try and manage the tools we already have more effectively. You get resistance in mosquitoes when they come in contact with a dose of insecticide that doesn't kill them. And natural selection, survival of the fittest, after a while, those that can survive these low doses of insecticide are going to be the ones that reproduce, and then you get more of them. And then the whole population suddenly isn't going to be killed by these insecticides. And so if we manage our tools properly, we can help avoid that. And we can, if we start to see resistance cropping up, maybe scale it back and make them susceptible again. The second is, like I mentioned, innovation. If we keep developing new tools, we can help skirt around some of these resistance problems that we've been running into. So a great example of this are PBO nets. So they're an insecticide-treated net, but they're effective against mosquitoes that are resistant to the typical insecticide that we put in these nets, because they have a second compound added in addition to the insecticide that just works right around the resistance that the mosquito has developed. So the mosquito thinks it's clever and it thinks it's protected, and then bam, it gets a 1-2 punch and it's down. And so not just developing these tools, but also making sure that they get to these areas where resistance crops up, regardless of ability to pay. Because it's one thing to have these tools, but if we don't use them, they're not going to be very effective.
That's right.
And then so the last way is with really careful monitoring and surveillance, so that we know where resistance is coming up and we can predict when and how bad it's going to get. Because like I said, with proper management, if we start to see insecticide resistance crop up, we can use a few techniques, switch around tools, change how we use them, and then we can exactly. We can reduce the amount of resistance in a population. But if we let it go for too long and too much of the mosquito population is resistant, we kind of hit a point where there's not much we can do about it. And so if we're really careful to monitor, to keep track of everything, we can usually nip it in the bud, or at least be planning from a malaria fight perspective, how to get around it in such a way that we don't see an uptick in cases and deaths, even if we still have resistance there.
That's right. Very, very, very true and powerful points indeed. And actually, insecticide-treated nets are given a long-lasting boost in the fight against malaria. And there's another study that was just published by scientists at Ifakara Health Institute, that's in Tanzania. So it was a prevention study, and they demonstrated that infants and young children who have been sleeping under the ITNs, that's insecticide-treated bed nets, showed nearly 40% survival advantage many years later. So they were following up on these kids many years later. So studies that were following up on the children. So that goes to show you that if we can find a way of improving the tools that we already have out there and fighting the big obstacle, which is resistance. And on top of that, with the vaccine and any other vaccines that we will have that are already in the pipeline that will be used in the fight against malaria, I think we are on the right track to eliminating this disease, one region at a time, and eventually eradicating it. That will be great news.
40% is huge. I wonder how
That's
many
huge.
children that was. That's amazing.
Hi, I'm Marcia Cantor, and I'm a champion. I live in Colorado, and I wrote a book called Mosquito Madness, which tells kids about the effect of malaria on children in the world. Would you speak about the impact of the vaccine on children and when we can anticipate that the vaccine will be widely available to kids? Thanks.
Thanks, Marcia. That's a great question. The new malaria vaccine is a major milestone in the fight against malaria. It's the first vaccine, not just against malaria, but any parasitic disease. They're biologically very complex, and so it's been a major challenge for scientists for decades now. And it brings a lot of hope. But I will say, that being said, it is just one tool in our toolbox. And when used in combination with these really excellent tools and really cost-effective tools that we've been using for years now, like bed nets, spraying, anti-malarial treatment, fever testing, it could save a lot of children's lives. And in fact, in the pilot studies, they found that this vaccine is reaching kids who haven't been able to be reached by some of our other key tools. And so that's really the sweet spot where it's going to have a huge impact. But again, while we're really excited about this vaccine and a lot of the other ones that we have in the pipeline that might follow on fairly soon, it needs to be part of a comprehensive plan. It's never going to be a silver bullet. And that's not just this vaccine. I think that's probably going to be true of any vaccine for any parasitic disease, just because of the way that they work. And so when we have this now to complement this really great host of tools that we can have a huge impact and save a lot of children's lives. So we're excited about it moving forward. And I'm curious to see how that technology continues to develop over the next several years.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you. It's a huge milestone in this fight against malaria. And just to see that we have finally just the first vaccine that has been licensed and approved for use in children to help with malaria prevention, that's a huge step. And honestly, vaccination has made a huge, fundamental contribution to global health. And we know vaccines save lives. So all the work that researchers are doing and trying to, look into innovative ideas, innovative strategies to develop effective vaccine, it's all that work, it's paying off. And I think this vaccine being approved is just opening doors for even all the other vaccine candidates in the pipeline. And it will help us get there, even though it's not 100% effective. And it's still a huge breakthrough that's going to help save lives of children. And when we use it, just like what you say, Tara, in combination with other prevention tools, it's going to help lower the, disease burden and also help so many other children, find ways of having increased school attendance, and also help with family incomes as well, people not missing work that much, and just moving forward to eventually eradicating the disease for sure. So it will take a lot of, community outreach and just finding a way of empowering the community, public health empowerment, and sharing with them why it's important for the children to get the vaccine to help, as a further prevention tool as well. So it's going to take a community effort. It's not just the government only doing the work, but finding a way of reaching out even in the remote areas, in high transmission areas as well, and helping out.
I'm Dawson. I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm a student. Given that each country has a unique set of circumstances, I'm curious to hear how doctors, community health workers, and agencies work together to determine how to fight malaria.
Thanks, Dawson. That is a very complicated question because, as you know, public health involves a lot of moving pieces. And as you mentioned, each country context is different. So how do we know what's the best way to approach the malaria fight in these different settings? Well, first, each country has their own national malaria strategic plan. They have their own plan where they've looked through what are their key challenges, who are their most vulnerable and important populations from the perspective of fighting malaria, and where's the best way for them to deliver their tools and allocate all of their resources so that they can have the biggest impact possible. And this will look different depending on where you are. In parts of sub-Saharan Africa, for example, you have a lot of malaria that's prevalent through a huge proportion of the population. But then in places, for example, like in Southeast Asia or in parts of Latin America, they're nearing elimination. And so it's a lot less prevalent in the population. And so it may be harder to find people who have malaria to make sure that we're reaching zero malaria cases in their country. And so the way that they strategize their malaria fight is going to be completely different. And each country knows best what their setting requires. But then at the top level, the WHO also has a global technical strategy. So how do we as a whole drive toward global malaria elimination? What are some of the key milestones that we need to meet if we're hoping to eliminate malaria within the next, several decades? And then on top of that, feeding into all of it, we have our major funding institutions and some of our bilateral partners. So two great examples are the Global Fund and PMI, who I'm sure you've all heard of many times. They have their own strategies that identify, okay, so we know the big picture. We know what the countries are hoping to do. Where can we fit in to have the most impact for the resources that we have available to us, whether that's money, human resources, commodities, relationships. And all together, these form a big, very complicated plan that aims to have the most impact as physically possible in, frankly, a very resource-constrained environment. How do we get the most bang for our buck and drive toward elimination? And a huge part of all of these plans are community health workers, the doctors, the health facilities, all of these different elements of the health systems in these countries that are trying to drive toward zero malaria. And each of them have their own unique role to play in these health systems. So, for example, you can't have a health system that's just based on community health workers any more than you can have one that's just based on huge hospitals. Community health workers serve a really important role as a linkage between these communities and then local health facilities, regional health facilities, and then the bigger ones. So they're one important link in the chain that connects these people to these facilities that may be an hour or two away for them in terms of travel. And that distance might prevent them from going to seek services. And so some of these community health workers can make sure people get regular health care that they might not be able to afford the time or money to get otherwise. And they also serve a really important role in reducing burden on the health system. So if there are community health workers who know how to test for malaria and treat it in these people's own community, rather than making them go to a regional hospital, now it's a relatively simple thing to do, and it reduces the strain on these hospitals and these health facilities that may be requiring more specialized skills, for example, surgery, or what if there's an outbreak, or what if there's COVID, where you have an onrush of new people into the hospital. And so they serve a really important role in building really strong health systems that can handle some of these buffets that may come their way through emergencies or pandemics or outbreaks.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. It needs people working together, and when you have the government finding a way of connecting with the doctors, you have the nurses, you have the community health workers reaching out. From the big cities, you go all the way to the remote areas. And just a little bit of my personal story: I was raised in a remote rural in Kisumu, Kenya, and whenever we had malaria or sick of malaria, we were really staying far away from the dispensary clinic. It was a very tiny clinic. And you can imagine, if you don't have that many nurses or community health workers around, it made it so hard. And that's why most of the lives maybe were lost, because there was no access to the health facilities, or maybe the one that was close by was very far away, and you had to wait for the public transportation in order to get there. So I totally agree. It's very important empowering people, and especially people in the medical field, whether you have the doctors, the nurses, community health workers, and just finding a way of reaching out to people in the remote areas as well, and government doing their duty of ensuring we have stronger systems, like stronger health systems and surveillance systems as well, and them doing their role and the people doing their role as well. And I think as a community, when we have those combined forces, it will help fight malaria. Thank you for all the wonderful questions that you asked, champions, and we are so proud of you. Keep up the fight. It takes effort, as champions, just reaching out and advocating for the fight against malaria.
Thanks again, Tara and Winter. Thanks for dropping your scientist knowledge. Super informative. And thanks to all of you who have been so active on social media. I want to give a shout out to Patrick with Vestergaard, as well as Diego Gutierrez, a former MLS player who was one of our first professional athlete champions. Also to Dola Dowie, she created a great I'm United to Beat Malaria Because video shared on Instagram. So keep them coming. One more shout out for Lisa Goldman Van Osteren, who tweeted. She's with Sumitomo and Glide. So anyway, please keep it up. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to tag us, Beat Malaria, and include the hashtag as well. So we've talked a lot about the various innovations that are needed in the malaria toolbox and efforts to ensure that those tools are accessible to all people, including those who live in the last mile. But how does all of this work come together? It takes extraordinary levels of collaboration across governments, companies, NGOs, civil society, and UN agencies to protect millions of people from malaria year after year, while keeping the world on track towards eradication. So this is where our next puzzle piece comes in, the partner. We're so grateful that two of our most committed partners, SC Johnson and Vestergaard, are joining us today to talk about the diverse ways that the private sector contributes to the fight against malaria and how we can galvanize and inspire others to join them. My fabulous colleague, Ilza Mengalis, UN Foundation Senior Director for the Business Council of the UN, will moderate the conversation. Ilza's career has focused on applying business approaches to international development, accelerating gains in health, gender equality, and poverty alleviation. In her current role, she designs and develops innovative corporate partnerships to help realize the ambition of the UN Sustainable Development Goals for a healthier and more equitable world and planet.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so pleased to be here with our speakers and with all of you, and with the United to Beat Malaria initiative, which is part of the United Nations Foundation. The United Nations Foundation has a long history of partnering with businesses, both large and small, to help carry out our mission of supporting the UN in building a better world, a more sustainable world, and a more just world. I'm so pleased to introduce our speakers today. First, we have Emi Kakas, who's Regional Manager for Public Health for Burkina Faso, Burundi, Rwanda, Mozambique, and Uganda at Vestergaard. Vestergaard, for those of you who may not know the company, is a humanitarian entrepreneurship company. The company invests in the development of new technologies and new markets within hard-to-reach or under-resourced populations. They make various innovations to support the sustainability of our food systems, and they also make bed nets permanent, which you will hear about today. Emmy was raised in France and in Mali, and prior to joining Vestergaard had various roles in global development, including working as a social scientist with the Millennium Development Goals Center. And next we have Sukanya Mishra, who is Associate Manager at the Base of the Pyramid Group at SC Johnson. Suki develops and executes social impact programs for SC Johnson's Base of the Pyramid Group with the goal of preventing disease for the world's 4 billion poorest people. This includes developing innovative tools for malaria prevention and partnering with NGOs and foreign governments to reduce malaria and dengue burden in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. SC Johnson is a U.S. privately held company that makes household cleaning and storage products and also pest control, hence their connection to the malaria problem. And I'm very excited to launch this conversation today. So let's get started. Can you both provide us with an overview of your company's involvement in malaria control and elimination efforts? Emily, let's start with you.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thanks for having me. It's really an honor. Vestergaard has been dedicated to the eradication of vector and waterborne illnesses for the past 30 years. And its very strength being to bring about, innovative tools with advanced technology to scale. And these tools are designed to improve the lives of the most vulnerable people in low and middle income countries. So alongside a neglected tropical disease and food security, the involvement of Vestergaard in the fight against malaria is mainly known through what our CEO, Michael Hughes, likes calling the humble bed net. And I really love this phrase because it says it all. It's a concentrated piece of technology which costs around $3 lasts about 3 years, and has so far protected an estimated 1.6 billion lives from malaria. And that is just a stat for our ground permanent. So you can imagine that the tool has a higher impact. So what do we do? When people use high quality bed nets with a technology that ensures first, killing mosquitoes that come into contact with the textile, and second, reducing the number of mosquitoes that are flying in the area of deployment, you achieve a two-in-one effect. You get a personal protection for those sleeping under the net, and you get community protection, including for those not sleeping under the net, because you are reducing the number of mosquitoes in the areas. So getting more than an 85% reduction in the number of mosquitoes present in the zones of our net results in between 30 to 40% less malaria cases. And this saves lives.
Thank you very much, Emmy. Suki, over to you.
Thanks, Ilse. It's an honor to be here today. So I'm part of a group at SCJ called the Base of the Pyramid Group, and our focus is creating access to mosquito-borne disease prevention for the most vulnerable populations, so people at the base of the economic pyramid. We're doing this through product innovation, public health partnership, and creating access in different ways. From an innovation perspective, we've developed a spatial repellent, which keeps mosquitoes from biting within a room. And it's lightweight, easy to use, and easy to distribute. And from a malaria perspective, we're trying to target residual transmission. So the idea is that this would be complementary to Emmy's bed nets. We're working with organizations like the University of Notre Dame on a series of large-scale clinical trials to prove that spatial repellents work against malaria and have public health value. And the goal there is a World Health Organization recommendation. And we've had some positive results from previous trials in Peru and Indonesia. This is a long process. These clinical trials take a lot of time. And so in the meantime, we're working with a consortium of country governments, NGOs, a private sector, and academic partners in East Africa on an initiative called the Great Lakes Malaria Initiative, with the goal of significantly reducing the malaria burden in the region. And SCJ's role in this is to supply innovative interventions, technical expertise, and support advocacy efforts. As we work towards these better malaria outcomes, we've worked with different partners to create access in different ways. So in Rwanda, for example, we've invested in basic health infrastructure via health posts in rural areas, which significantly impacted malaria rates very quickly. And because of that success, we're taking that model and applying it to different countries within the region. Over the last year, we've reached nearly 5 million people with product and 19.5 million people with education campaigns. We feel like there's a real impact to be had in the malaria space, and we're excited to be part of the fight.
All right, thank you both. So you talked about the kind of the what of your company's activities in malaria. Can you talk a bit about the why and why your companies are engaged and the extent to which your work is philanthropic versus economically based? Tell us a little bit more about that. Emmy, let's start with you.
So let's remind each other that malaria poses considerable damage to the youngest and the poorest of our world. Malaria still means that a child dies every 2 minutes. And for those adults that have contracted the disease or that are contracting the disease, malaria results in impaired productivity and an educational attainment. It has a direct impact, a direct cost of 500,000 deaths and $12 billion per year. So we are dealing with a disease that is a serious threat to all the 17 goals of the SDG. And you know, I regard Vestergaard's involvement in malaria control as really a passionate pledge. And one of our company's value is called passioneering. It's about engineering with passion and to create scalable solutions designed to improve the health of people and those people living in the most difficult situations. So this comes directly from the very foundation of Vestergaard, the humanitarian entrepreneurship business model that you have mentioned in the introduction. So a bit of history here and why malaria. When Michael Vestergaard took the leadership of the company, which was a family-owned enterprise created in the 50s, he had a very pioneering vision and he wanted to reconcile two seemingly opposite notions, doing business and doing good. So he managed to align all the company's business objectives with the MDGs at the time by finding solutions to improve the quality of life for the most vulnerable. So this approach that combines our expertise in disease control textiles and our philosophy to drive change, to impact people, still stands very much today. We are now measuring our success alongside the SDGs and with a commitment to do business responsibly for the environment and for people. So for whoever wants to have an impact on the SDG, malaria is one of the perfect candidates, having negative impact on all the SDGs. And that's why we are fighting malaria.
Mm-hmm. SC Johnson, like Vestergaard, is also a family-owned company. And we're primarily engaged in this fight because at SCJ, we're fortunate to have a chairman who is dedicated to improving lives for families around the world in communities of all sizes and socioeconomic levels. And that's something that comes to life in different ways across the organization. So we see that in our commercial business, and we also see that in my group, the Base of the Pyramid group. We say that we're a family company at work for a better world, and that's something that SCJ truly espouses. My group's remit is impact, not profit. And so we measure that impact in different ways, but the primary endpoint is disease prevention. In malaria specifically, we have this long history of developing pest control products. And we've actually been engaged in different geographies on malaria prevention activities for a long time. But as you mentioned, Ilse, the formation of my group like 9 years ago is basically what took that and made it a much more strategic effort for the company. So we have this long history of social impact and philanthropy that we're building on, and the fight against malaria allows us to leverage our core competencies towards making the world a better place.
Thank you. That's a perfect segue to the next thing we want to talk about, which is, so both of your companies make products that are central to the elimination of malaria, but what other competencies and capabilities do your companies contribute? Can you unpack that for us a little bit?
At SCJ, as a consumer packaged goods company, we do a lot of work around understanding our end user. For us, in the base of the pyramid side, that translates to education and social behavior change, communication. Because of the brands that we own and the types of products that we make, we have significant competency in entomology, in developing innovative vector control products, and in launching and distributing innovative products. I think one of the things that we hear a lot from our NGO partners and academic partners is that sometimes we serve as a catalyst because we bring this business mindset and a focus on meaningful outputs and results. So I think part of that is that we have the resources, the business acumen, and experience in driving timelines to drive for those results.
Okay, super. And Emmy, tell us a bit more about Vestergaard. I'm pretty sure you do a lot more than just make and deliver bed nets.
Yes, thanks. I think I touched a little bit on that earlier, and it's true that we are really trying to leverage our technical skills and do a lot of capacity building and knowledge sharing. We are, for example, really advocated for the knowledge around insecticide resistance in Africa. This has really been one of our big battles, and we put together a tool, a mapping and tracking tool in collaboration with other partners that is called IR Mapper. And we've been really trying to preach about this IR Mapper everywhere in Africa and trying to elevate the discussions around ontological data and vector control. So there's a lot we do, but I think I would really love for this question that you're asking to consider private sector as a whole here, because companies can do so much in terms of innovation, of funding, of technical skills, of core competencies, because malaria can be tackled at so many different levels and in a variety of ways that it would be actually difficult for any given business to not find a way to contribute. And I think that if private sector is given the right environment, they can perform little miracles. So I believe that all private sector must be encouraged to act above and beyond their first line of expertise. That's what Suki is also saying. If we invite them to go beyond this line of expertise and to join global challenges such as the fight against malaria, we can really achieve amazing milestones.
So let's continue to widen the tent a little bit and talk a bit more about the partnership kind of ecosystem that exists and that is needed to be effective. So we have forums like the Rollback Malaria Partnership. We have the Business Alliance Against Malaria. How do your companies work with these groups, and what other sectors are needed to join you to help beat malaria?
I think there are numerous ways to incentivize private sector companies to work on malaria. And really the biggest is that we know malaria is preventable. And this is an opportunity for companies to leverage their resources for something bigger. We can eradicate malaria within our lifetimes. And going back to what Emmy said, malaria does have significant impacts on community health, and the consequences stretch far beyond the disease burden. The societal costs of malaria are substantial. The costs in terms of lost economic growth, lost work days, school days. And I think the economic case there for private sector around impaired worker productivity and diminished recruitment pipelines due to lower educational achievement are compelling. There's also the consumer aspect, and consumers are increasingly values driven and more likely to support companies whose values align with their own. So there's a significant potential upside to investments in this space.
Great, thank you. Emmy, can you talk about the partnership landscape either as it is or as you wish it were?
Yeah, sure. As I wish it were. I really agree with Suki. We have such a diverse private sector landscape, but we have not yet reached this diversity in the very useful forums that we are trying to set. And the fact that, malaria is bad for business, that may very well be the first cornerstone for business engagement in the fight to beat this disease once and for all. Because this fight cannot be narrowed to just the public health sector or the private sector working for public health. The private sector at large is capable of designing creative and innovative solutions within their own and diverse expertise or domain. So yes, like private companies must take part in the fight against malaria, but how can we progress here? So thanks to organizations like BAM or RBM, who are dedicated to private sector engagement, they take the task to get a good number of companies to understand the negative impacts malaria can have on their business. They also even help them understand the negative impact that their business have on malaria or the positive impact that their business can have on malaria transmission. So this is fruitful. This is a promising initiative.
But clearly this has been a fight that's been going on for a long time. The business cases that you both referenced are incredibly important. I'll add not only to businesses, but also to ministers of finance to understand the degree of funding that's needed to support this work. What gives you both hope that we will make progress toward a malaria-free generation?
Yes, thanks. So being positive, I think is the word and I've never been so rich. And when we look at global wealth reports, the net worth of our beautiful planet has more than tripled between 2000 and 2021. We have created a net worth of $510 trillion US. So there is money, and there is no ethical reason, to my opinion, to justify the flatlining of malaria funding. So the work that the UN Foundation is doing is critical. And this is why I believe that now what is needed is a bold and novel approach to design policies and regulations with a collaborative and responsible mindset to put an end to this disease. And I'm very hopeful about it.
Okay. Suki, what gives you hope?
So I'm hopeful about the future of malaria when I see who's engaged in this fight. I've been lucky enough to spend time in vulnerable communities and see, the community health workers knocking on their neighbors' doors to educate them about malaria. And these are people who do this on a volunteer basis because they are so passionate about this cause. Sometimes when I'm sitting here in Wisconsin, it can feel a little removed. And so it's very encouraging to go out into the world and see that there are so many people, so many different minds working on this issue. And I think the other piece that gives me a lot of optimism is it's been done before. We used to have malaria in the US and we don't anymore. Every year, more and more countries are joining the list of countries that used to have malaria and no longer do. They've reached eradication. And that is big and gives me hope that we can eradicate malaria.
Great. Well, it's incredibly passionate executives like yourselves and companies like the companies that you work for that gives us hope. So thank you for partnering with us. Thank you for the great work that you do. And thank you for being here today.
Fascinating insights. Thanks so much, Ilza, Emmy, and Suki. And thanks again to SC Johnson and Vestergaard for their support and for being such committed partners that lend their expertise to this fight. And now we're going to turn to Mazi for another round of trivia. Come on board, Mazi. All right, have fun. Thanks.
That's right, I am back for round 2 of Trivia with me, Mozzie the Mosquito. Just a reminder of how things work, go to www.kahoot.it, that's Kahoot.it, or open your Kahoot mobile app, or you can click on the Trivia tab to your right. Then you'll type in the passcode you see at the top of the screen. And please do type in your first initial and last name so we know who to fly the prize to if you win. We're giving away another $50 gift card and swag bag United to Beat Malaria. So you don't want to miss it. All right, we'll give you about 30 seconds to log in. And I see we have a lot of folks already joining us. Hi, folks. I see John. I see we have the Illinois JCs back on. I see we have Andrew, Monica, Kelly, Bella. Thank you all for joining and playing along with us. We'll give you a couple more seconds to get logged in. Hi, Julia. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Greg. It is great to be with you all. I wonder who's going to win this round. Oh, I see we have our West Coast watch party up on the screen. They're going to be tough to beat. Okay, we're going to get started in just a few more seconds. Thank you to everyone who is joining us. Okay. Moving on to question number 1, round 2, Trivia with Mozzie the Mosquito. Okay, so this first one is going to be a word cloud. That means that you need to type in your answer into the text box. This question is inspired by those puzzle pieces we've been showing you. We all have a role to play in the fight to beat malaria. Describe your role in 1 to 2 words. Perhaps you're a health worker, an advocate, a scientist, a teacher. There are really no wrong answers here. Okay, let's see some of your responses. I see we have your role is donating money, being a partner, an advocate, to spread the word, to be a scientist, and to be a champion. These are all fantastic answers. We all have a role to play, and all of these roles are so important. Okay, now we have a few multiple choice questions for you. And don't forget, this is a game of speed. Fortune favors the fast. In Africa alone, malaria's economic burden is at least how much each year? Is it 12 million, 120 million, 12 billion, or 120 billion? That's right, we're not just talking about the human impact. We're talking about healthcare costs, school days missed, decreased productivity, loss of investment. I really do a lot of damage, huh? It looks like 11 of you have guessed the right answer, $12 billion. That is absolutely correct. Great job, folks. Oh, and I see we've just had our watch parties on screen. Thank you all for playing along. Let's look at our leaderboard. We have Zach in first place, followed by the West Coast team, our watch party, Sean, Seabray, and Carson. Great job, everyone. If you're not on the leaderboard yet, don't worry. You still have 2 or 3 questions left to get up there. This SC Johnson product shows promising results in repelling malaria-carrying mosquitoes from indoor and outdoor spaces. Is it insecticide-treated clothing, spatial repellent, indoor residual spray, or bug zapper? Yeesh. Okay, you've got about 7 seconds left to get your answers in. Which one do you think it is? There are so many effective tools out there designed to defeat me. I guess I should be flattered. That's right, 17 of you have guessed the right answer, which is spatial repellent. All right, let's keep going. Okay, let's see our leaderboard. It looks like we have Seabray, Julia, and Jeff climbing the rankings. Zach and our West Coast team are still in first and second. They're going to be tough to beat. Question 4. To reach those most at risk, malaria services are commonly integrated into what other kind of care? Is it prenatal care, child immunization programs, humanitarian aid, or all of the above? And yes, that is Victoria Momo, one of our healthcare heroes that you met earlier. 5 seconds. Let's see what the right answer is. Wow, 31 of you guessed the right answer, which is D, all of the above. And I see our watch parties on screen. Hey, everyone, it's great to see you. Thanks for bringing that energy and excitement. Okay, in first place, we still have Zach. In second is our West Coast team. But this is still anybody's game, so don't fret. We still have 1 more question left for you to get on the leaderboard. With the help of Juana Menjivar, this country became the first in Central America to be certified malaria-free by the WHO. Is it Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, or Guatemala? What do you all think? You have to be paying really close attention earlier to get this one right. And yes, that is another familiar face. Juana was also one of our healthcare heroes featured earlier. Let's see. Great job, 27 of you have guessed the correct answer, El Salvador. Great. Now, let's see who made it to the podium. In third place, we have Jeff. Congratulations, Jeff, you are in third place. In second, we have our West Coast watch party. Great job, Nicole, and the entire West Coast. And in first place, we have Zach. Congratulations, Zach. You are the winner of round 2 of Mozzie Trivia. Thanks everyone for playing, and to the winners, keep an ear for a buzz at your door. Prizes are on the way. Well done. Now it's time to check in with you, our champions, and hear why you are united to beat malaria. Take it away, champs.
Hi, I'm Ramon Miller, the Director of Insurance Training at USLI. I'm united to beat malaria, to save many lives, and beat this preventable, treatable, curable disease once and for all.
So I'm united to beat malaria because together within our generation, we can make the bold decision to put an end to malaria. From grassroots communities to the very top of the pyramid, it is really time for our generation to design policies in a synergetic and cooperative manner that can bring all economic agents to the front end of this war.
Hello, I'm Paul Siniga, a youth advocate from Tanzania. I am united to beat malaria because ending malaria in my continent of Africa is possible.
Hi, my name is Miska Saleman. I'm united to beat malaria because I believe that every person has the fundamental right to live a healthy life. And with the science and technology we have, including indoor residual spraying campaigns, bed nets, and surveillance technology, there's no reason why we can't beat malaria for good.
Hi, I'm Winter Koth. I'm united to beat malaria because it is a life-threatening disease of great public health concern, and we need to eradicate it now.
Thanks so much, champions. That was amazing. And just a reminder, we'd love to hear from each and every one of you. If you could create your very own I'm United to Beat Malaria video message. We may even give you a shout out if you post your video. And please don't forget again to include our new handle and hashtag #BeatMalaria. You'll have some time in a few moments as we're about to go on another break, so stretch our legs and get re-energized. So we'll see you back here at 6:45 p.m. East Coast time. And I'm so glad to see that our watch parties are still with us. Woohoo! Y'all did great. I saw you were active on Twitter and the watch parties and the trivia. Thank you. See you all at 6:45 East Coast time.
Be sure to buzz on over to our social media pages under our new handles, @BeatMalaria on Twitter and @UnitedToBeatMalaria on Instagram.
wọ́n bínú orí ni ẹ̀kọ́ pé bóyí máa lò ẹ̀nànà fẹ́ ní lójú ọ̀ ata ló fi sẹ́nu ẹ̀nànà kí ni lẹ́yìn ẹ̀kọ́ ló fi sọ̀rọ̀ wá tó bá ẹ̀jẹ̀ lẹ́yìn ayọ̀ máa fẹ́ ní fọ̀rọ̀ òyà gbé sí wọn létí kó jẹ́ kó rí gbọ́ pàtó ti dé wọ́n jẹ́ kó rí gbọ́ wà lọ limit mà ló ṣeré àsìkò wà lóde ọba tí wọ́n rí kẹ́sà májú àkàtà máa jọ pẹ̀lẹ́ yan dúdú a máa jọ pàkúrúmọ́ 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 ìjọ tuntun mọ́dé pàkúrúmọ́ 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 bàbá tí bá wọn ṣe. Bóyá ẹ̀dá ò láròpin yẹn, ọ̀rẹ́ kò túra ká. Torí pé ní láwa mọ̀, kò sẹ́ni tó mọ̀lá. Ọ̀rẹ́ tó bá dára fún rẹ̀, ó rántí pàdí ẹ̀. Àní tó bá dẹ́kun díẹ̀, ọmọ máa pẹ́ pàdí ẹ̀ lọ́lẹ̀. Bóyá gbé sí wọn létí kó jẹ́ kán rí gbọ́ pàtó ti dé. Ọmọ jẹ́ kán rí gbọ́. Mẹ́fà ló ṣeré, àsìkò wá lóde. Àkàtà máa jó pẹ̀lú iyọ̀ dúdú a máa jó. Pàkúrúmọ́ 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 pàkúrúmọ́. Ìjọ tuntun mọ́dé. Pàkúrúmọ́ 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 pàkúrúmọ́. Bàbá tí bá wọn ṣe. Tuntun kò dé. Bóyá gbé sí wọn létí kó jẹ́ kán rí gbọ́ páyé gbẹ́gẹ́ o. Ọ̀rẹ́ ṣọ́ra fáyé o, ayé má ṣòro o. Tó bá ní gbàgbọ́ pé bàbá bẹ lókè kó má sọ ohun tó dùn tó. Ọ̀rẹ́ má jí sòro o. Àwọn tá ti rò pé kó lè júná mọ́, àmọ́ ìlú ti yí padà, bàbá ti gbé wa lékè. Ẹni táyé rò pé kó lè pagán kọrin alárinrin ẹ jẹ́ ká máa jó. Pakurumọ, 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 pakurumọ. Ijó tàkùrùmọ̀dé. Pakurumọ, 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 pakurumọ. Bàbá tí bá wà ṣe. Pakurumọ, 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 pakurumọ. Ijó tàkùrùmọ̀dé. Pakurumọ, 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 pakurumọ. Bàbá tí bá wà ṣe. Tẹ́ bá dé Amẹ́ríkà, wọ́n ń jíjó wa. Tẹ́ bá dé ìlú Europe, wọ́n ń jíjó wa. Ní gbogbo UK, wọ́n ń jíjó wa. Tẹ́ bá dé ìlú Asia, wọ́n ń jíjó wa. Tẹ́ bá dé ìlú Áfíríkà, wọ́n ń jíjó wa. Gàgà nínú Nàìjíríà, gbogbo ènìyàn wọ́n máa jó. Pakurumọ, 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 pakurumọ. Ijó tàkùrùmọ̀dé. Pakurumọ, 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 pakurumọ. Bàbá tí bá wà ṣe.
united to beat malaria because I don't believe anybody should live in fear of losing a family member to a mosquito bite.
Hi, my name's Bal. I'm from Born Clothing in Newcastle, Australia. At Born Clothing, we are united to beat malaria because we believe that everyone deserves to live a life that is healthy, fulfilled, and free from preventable disease. With the prospect of climate change, the refugee crisis, and ongoing health inequities, the people who are most vulnerable to malaria are as vulnerable as they have ever been. And now is a time for us to step up, unite, and beat malaria for good.
I am united to beat malaria because malaria continues to be a threat to everybody. What concerns everyone should also concern every New Yorker.
I'm united to beat malaria because no child or young person should ever pass away from a preventable disease. And I truly believe that as young people, we hold the keys to advocating for a better future for children worldwide.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ndefanji, and I'm united to beat malaria because it is time to take our future back.
Welcome back, everyone. All right, now we're in the home stretch, and we've saved some of the best programming for last. Before we start our next session, I'd like to thank all of you who have engaged on social media and posted videos, such as Odinaka, Deus, and Jeff Buger. Thanks so much. We also want to remind you that we have a very special message from President Biden at the end of the program, so please stick with us. For our next session, we're going to highlight the vital role that advocacy plays in driving public and political will. If we're going to beat this disease, we need sustained commitments from both endemic and donor countries, as well as the private sector. This requires a steady drumbeat of advocacy that keeps malaria at the forefront of public and policy agendas around the world. So now we're going to introduce the advocate piece of the puzzle. With that, I'm excited to introduce you to the panelists for the United in Advocacy session, 4 passionate malaria champions who are leading advocacy efforts across the US and Africa. Olivia Ngu is a public health specialist from Cameroon who leads the Civil Society for Malaria Elimination, a global network of civil society groups dedicated to eliminating malaria. Dr. Defanji Namacha is a medical doctor and a global health advocate from Malawi who serves as a Malaria No More UK Youth Ambassador and the co-lead for the RBM Partnership to End Malaria Youth Workstream. Renee Perez is a longtime United to Beat Malaria champion, originally from Venezuela, who lives in Florida. She's regularly met with her members of Congress, organized events, and written op-eds. And last but not least, Anirudh Mandalapu, who is a Bay Area native and another longtime champion, who has raised thousands of dollars through Taekwondo and basketball events and has joined us to advocate on Capitol Hill. I hope you enjoy this conversation between these 4 passionate malaria advocates.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Renee Perez. I'm from Venezuela, and I'm very proud to say I've been a Nothing But Nets champion since 2017. I first became involved in Nothing But Nets when I was working with my local chapter of the UNA in Tampa Bay, and I've been involved in the fight to end malaria ever since.
Hey everyone, I'm Anirudh Mandalapu. I'm from Union City, California. I'm currently a medical student at the University of Rochester. I've been involved with Nothing But Nets since 2014.
I'm Dr. Defanji Namaja, and I'm from the home part of Africa, Malawi. I'm a Zero Malaria Youth Champion, but also a co-lead with RBM Partnership to End Malaria Youth Workstream. I've worked in the front lines as a medical doctor, as a researcher, but also now working in the front lines as an advocate. I'm so excited to be sharing with you this afternoon.
My name is Olivia. I'm a public health specialist and engaged in malaria for the last 10 years. I'm the global coordinator of the first global platform of civil society organization engaged in malaria elimination. I'm very happy to be a part of this conversation. Ending malaria is a true passion of mine. It's for this reason that we have co-created the Global Civil Society Platform for Malaria Elimination. And so I'm interested to know what makes you passionate about this cause. And for me, I would say I'm passionate about malaria elimination because it's a disease that we can prevent and we can treat. And today we still have a high number of people losing their life to this malaria. And I believe that we as human beings, we have the potential and the power to have all the tools that are necessary to eliminate the disease once once for all. So I believe that if you're able to go to March, then you're able to eliminate malaria within this generation, and it's a very possible goal. So I'm interested to know what makes you passionate about this cause of malaria elimination.
Oh yeah, thank you very much for sharing about your passion. Like you've said, I'm so passionate about it because this is a disease that's taking up a lot of lives, but it's totally preventable and also treatable. And growing up in Malawi, which is a malaria endemic country, you know, from a young age, you'd hear about malaria. You go to school and your classmate is missing school because they're suffering from malaria. They didn't come to school, and you know, you actually think it's the normal. You're like, oh, where's John? John is not in class because of malaria. And you know, growing up, and then I got to med school. And, you know, I'm practicing and I'm studying in med school and I'm seeing children coming in, convalescing children in the malaria season, convalescing due to severe malaria. You see pregnant women, you know, miscarrying or even giving birth to low birth weight children because of malaria. And I think that's something that really, really spooked my heart. And I was like, you know what? Now that I'm informed, I know that this is totally preventable and it is treatable as well. And that is really just drove my passion in the fight against malaria. So, you know, malaria for me is beyond the professional circles. It's something that's personal to me as well. You know, I've had family members suffering from malaria and even losing, you know, family to severe malaria. So this is something that's very passionate to me. And, you know, I'd like to hear what others have to say as well.
For me, I think I empathized with children who had to deal with malaria a lot when I was young. I used to go to India a lot with my parents, and malaria was endemic there for a while. It still is there, but it's not as bad. But I remember I used to hate mosquitoes and mosquito bites. And so I already didn't like mosquitoes. And in third grade, Nothing But Nets actually did a segment on American Idol where they showed what children have to go through in malaria endemic countries. And I remember watching that with my parents, and I couldn't believe it. And it was something that I wish I could do something about, with the fact that it's really a burden on children and pregnant women. And because of that, later on when I had time in high school and beyond, I thought I should do something about it. And that's when I got involved. And now I want to see it through, because as you both mentioned, that it is possible in our lifetime to get this done because it's a preventable and curable disease.
In the Venezuela where I grew up, long before COVID, we were already used to feeling powerless against disease and even staying inside to avoid getting sick. Only back then it was a fear of mosquito-borne illnesses. While I was in college, as other countries in South America were making tremendous progress towards eliminating malaria, Venezuela saw a massive resurgence in malaria cases due to the crisis. So I just think it's a tremendous privilege to be able to sit across from members of the US Congress and their staffers, who are some of the most influential people in the world, and share my story.
As Renee just mentioned, we do a lot of political advocacy and, you know, talk to our members of Congress. We also engage on social media, make calls to Capitol Hill, and write letters to the editor. But with that in mind, I was wondering how advocates in malaria endemic countries like Malawi and Cameroon mobilize action.
So thank you very much for sharing that. And it's really exciting to hear what the youth are doing on your end. And I always say that the efforts in eliminating malaria are very global and they're interrelated. And I like this conversation because it's really bringing insights to what you're doing and what we're also doing on this end, because I feel like the youth work in silos. So just to mention a few things that the youth are doing, you know, in Malawi, but also in Africa, there are a lot of youth-led organizations. I'm going to give an example of Block Malaria. This is a community youth-led organization that is going in the communities, mobilizing, creating awareness, but also holding their leaders accountable. We've got youth that are working in the front lines as researchers. You know, the recent malaria vaccine, you know, Malawi was actually part of the research team, and it was really exciting to see the youth that were part of the research team. So there's so much that the youth are doing, and I'm so excited to hear of the power of social media. You know, we also use social media a lot here. Twitter, Facebook, we've seen how that can be impactful and can help us to communicate to our leaders. I just like to know what other countries are doing as well.
So in Cameroon, malaria advocates, especially civil society organizations, are doing sort of two types of advocacy, one at a political level and another one at the operational or community engagement level. So at the political level, civil society get together, coordinate their efforts to write declarations, statements, to organize press conferences, to rally around to ensure that political leaders continue to have malaria high on their agenda, especially in this context of the COVID-19 pandemics, security context, and other issues that we face every day. So it's important to constantly remind them that malaria still is one of the first causes of mortality in the country, and greater attention needs to be paid to this cause in order for the country to reach its goal of malaria elimination. So besides engaging political leaders at the operational and community level, is civil society also engage community leaders, but also implementers, ensuring that malaria programs are being implemented efficiently, ensuring that we leave no one behind, and also engaging more recently in community monitoring activities to actually acknowledge issues around malaria implementation and raise those issues for correction at the decision level process. So civil society, advocacy for malaria is critical, and especially elevating the voices of communities affected by malaria to ensure that no one is left behind, and then we have a greater increase of malaria services for all communities. So those are some of the way civil society organizations work, and through the CS4Me network, they are able to coordinate these advocacy efforts and have a united voice and messages, and are able to increase the demand for more efficient malaria program, but also increase domestic funding around malaria. So yes, it's true that we are starting to increase advocacy in Africa for malaria, especially from civil society, but that's certainly not easy, particularly looking at our context. So we know advocacy has its own challenges and its own up and down. So I'm very curious to learn some of the highlights of your advocacy efforts, and also what keeps you inspired and what gives you the hope to continue with this fight, because we know it's definitely not easy. And I will give you the first example for us, what keep us going, even in the difficult period with economic crisis, is because malaria is one of those diseases where, fortunately, we have the tools to treat the disease. We have great strategy to actually save lives. It's not a disease that's not curable. So we do have effective tools. And now we actually welcome the new vaccine from Malawi that was tested, for example, in Malawi and other countries. So there are tools, and now we really need to push and for our leaders to continue to increase and invest in malaria. So what keeps us going is the fact that we cannot give up at this time, because we have all the tools to save life and to prevent death from this disease. So I'm curious to know what keeps you going in times like this, where advocacy for malaria can become very challenging.
I think for me, my first highlight, my advocacy highlight, I would say, was the Malaria Summit in London, and that was in 2018. I was one of the keynote speakers, and this was just in time for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meetings, and that was when I really saw firsthand the impact of advocacy, where we saw, after the summit, and like I said, I was one of the keynote speakers, we saw financial, political, and scientific commitment that was amounting to about $4.1 billion US, and that was, firsthand seeing how the power of advocacy, the power of bringing different civil society, government, scientists, entrepreneurs together in the fight against malaria. So that was a highlight for me. The other highlight was actually last year when we saw, WHO approving the first ever malaria vaccine. That was a highlight. But further to that, like with COVID, there's always issues to do with equitable and accessibility of vaccines. And when Gavi made a commitment to fund the malaria vaccine for African countries, I think that was the second highlight in my advocacy career. But also just seeing the vibe, the youth, the excitement that the youth are actually, engaging in the fight against malaria and the motivation that they have. There was a survey that was conducted by RBM, and they were saying that, the youth are believing that malaria is going to be eliminated in their lifetime. The youth are actually believing that they want to take change, they want to take a stand. So, things are very different as when we're young. The youth are now excited, they're more inspired, and, they're aware that malaria is preventable and malaria is treatable. So I think these three have been really the highlights in my career. What about you in the US? What are the key highlights in your advocacy, Jenny?
For me, I had three highlights personally. The first was my first ever fundraiser when I was in high school. Again, a lot of young people have a lot of cool, unique talents and a lot of time on their hands, probably more time on their hands than some of the adults have. And I think this is a good example of the fact that you can use your talents to bring awareness about something. And in this case, it was malaria for me, to your local community. So I had a fundraiser where we did a Taekwondo demonstration with the demonstration team at my Taekwondo school, because I'd been doing it for over 10 years at that point. And it was a great way to get people in our local community who might not know as much about malaria to at least be aware of what it is. And then at the same time to get monetary, contributions so that we could help people who really need help. And, Nothing But Nuts helps make that money turn into something real on the other end in endemic countries. So that was my first highlight. My second being in college, where again, I used to play basketball a lot for fun. And I realized that I had a community of people who I could relate to with this talent or this activity that I would do for fun. But it was a great way to also show them about something that is going on in the world. And also, again, to raise money for this cause. So I put together a basketball tournament. And we also auctioned away one of our champions' autographed pictures to get more people to come, Steph Curry. So thank you to him and Nothing But Nets for having great champions. But it was a great way to engage my local community out here in Rochester, and also to raise a lot of money, which was great. And then finally, my first summit in DC here was an amazing experience, just to be able to forge relationships with our representatives and let them know that we care. It was the first time that I realized my representative had recognized me from some of the emails and previous meetings I had had. And he was willing to support, increased funding for the PMI and Global Fund. And I thought it was the coolest thing, that you could actually make an impact with, just a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, and sharing your passion with your representatives. So those three were definitely my personal highlights.
For me, there's one particular moment that I want to shine a spotlight on, because I think there's a few valuable lessons in that experience. So a couple of years ago, I attended a town hall for Representative Kathy Castor in Tampa, where she was going to be updating constituents on how things were going in DC, and possibly taking a few questions from the audience. And so at the end of the town hall, they did allow for a few questions, and I was lucky enough that they called on me. And I stood up, gave a quick elevator pitch about who I was, where I was from, why I was passionate about malaria elimination. And I asked Representative Castor to please support a House resolution recognizing the Walter Reed Army Institute's research into malaria interventions. And the next day, I actually got an email from her deputy chief of staff saying that they had read over the materials I gave them, and that Representative Castor agreed to sign on to the resolution. So like you mentioned, Dr. Defanji, after the conference where you were a keynote speaker, where you felt like you could really see the difference that you were making. So I think there's a few valuable lessons here. Number one, always show up. So at this particular town hall, one-on-one time was not guaranteed, but we showed up anyway, and it made all the difference. Number two, the power of building relationships with your member of Congress's office. Anirudh, you touched on this when you mentioned your representative recognized you. It was the same for me. When we got to the town hall, the staffers recognized my friend Nicole and I, because we had recently been at their office to advocate for Nothing But Nets. And I really think that's part of the reason why they felt comfortable giving me the floor during the town hall. And the last lesson is just that the work that we're doing has a tangible impact, and we're playing the long game. Even though you may not always get a commitment when you leave a member of Congress's office, it's all of our collective efforts added up over time that really make the difference. And as for what keeps me inspired, that's an easy question. It's connecting with other champions every year. The Nothing But Nets community, our stories, our successes, our challenges, learning about what's happening in Malawi and Cameroon and Rochester, all of it motivates me to keep up the good fight.
Wow, thank you, Renee, for sharing that. It's really inspiring. And like you said, we really need to show up, even when you don't think that they're going to give you the platform. But one thing that I've learned is that show up anyways. And like you say, it's so exciting hearing what you're doing and relating that to Cameroon, because I'm so happy I was able to join this conversation, because like I said, I feel a lot of the youth advocates are working in silos, but this allows us, to find that multicultural, global conversation, the global relationship and the similarities, and even share forces and unite in the fight against malaria. So I don't know what you feel, Olivia, but I was very excited to be part of this conversation and just to learn from what our friends are doing. And I'm sure there's so much that we can also do this side.
I absolutely agree. And the role of youth is very important. They are the future of this fight. And it's true that if they engage, the earlier they engage, the better result we're going to have in the next 3 years, and the better chances we have to reach elimination globally. So I also learned a lot from all the amazing advocates who are here from different parts of the world. And I really believe that it should be, and it is no longer acceptable that we continue to lose a child, a mom, a person to a disease we can prevent and we can treat in 2022. So we're hoping that this will help and inspire others to join us in this fight for malaria advocacy, so that together we can achieve one of the greatest humanitarian goal in our history, getting rid of malaria. I think we all are part of this journey, and I'm looking forward to work with you all on this. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jeff Booyer, and I'm united to beat malaria because families around the world continue to live under the threat of a mosquito bite. I became a champion through the Wyoming chapter of Junior Chamber International, known as the JCs or JCI. This is my 5th leadership summit and my 2nd year serving as a program manager on behalf of JCI USA. Each year, JCs from around the country unite to beat malaria by engaging with members of Congress. I am proud to lead this effort that builds unity around the belief that no one should die because of a mosquito bite. As JCs, we are committed to taking this message forward. That's why I am proud to announce that we have 57 JCs representing 19 states that will meet with members of Congress from both sides of the aisle to highlight the importance of ending malaria. So thank you to all champions and JCs who are committed to ending malaria, and thank you to our members of Congress for their continued support.
Gosh, I love those sessions. I love seeing the advocates from around the world collaborating, and I hope that this will be a launch pad for future collaboration. I also want to give another shout out to JCI, who's been the most reliable advocacy partners for many years. It's super exciting to hear that we have a record number of JCs joining us for Advocacy Day on Tuesday. In endemic countries, policymakers determine the prioritization and funding levels for malaria and global health priorities. And here in the US, we're fortunate to have strong bipartisan leadership from both Republicans and Democrats in both the Senate and the House of Representatives, and support for robust funding for the Global Fund, PMI, and CDC. We're thankful for their continued leadership on Capitol Hill. And again, we're thankful to each of you, our champions, for your persistent advocacy that has helped ensure that malaria remains a congressional priority. With that, I'd like to introduce our second to last puzzle piece, the policymaker. And now I'd like to transition to the Inside Washington fireside chat with my boss, Peter Yo. Peter serves as the president of the Better World Campaign and the senior vice president of the UN Foundation. Peter leads UNF's strategic engagement with Congress and the administration to advance policies that support the UN and its global work. Before joining UNF in 2009, Peter had over 20 years of legislative, analytical, and management experience, including senior roles on Capitol Hill and the State Department, working on foreign relations and global health initiatives, such as the landmark HIV/AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria Act of 2003, also known as PEPFAR.
Thank you, Margaret. And such an honor and pleasure to be with you all today. I'm just very excited that you all were able to join for the second virtual Nothing But Nets Beat Malaria Summit. Hopefully next year we can be together in person for our annual gathering. I look forward to it. And I'm really glad that you're going to the Hill on Tuesday virtually. Members of Congress and staff, they continue to need to hear from their constituents about the importance of beating malaria and the role that the United States government plays in not only providing financial support to the efforts to end malaria, but also to galvanize other global players to take leadership roles in beating malaria once and for all. Before talking a little bit about the Global Fund in malaria, I wanted to take a step back for the moment and talk about what's on the mind of members of Congress and their staff at the moment, because you're going to talk to them on Tuesday. So I think it's important that you know what they're talking about in their offices and thinking about at the moment. Internationally, it's Ukraine and Afghanistan. Domestically, it's whether some elements of the president's ambitious Build Back Better proposal can still be enacted into law. So let's start with Ukraine. There is bipartisan support on Capitol Hill for the Ukrainian government and the Biden administration's continued efforts to aid the Ukrainian government as it battles the Russian invasion. President Putin has not only succeeded in bringing together NATO, bringing together the Europeans with the United States, but he's also succeeded in bringing Republicans and Democrats together in Washington, which is a rare occasion these days. And it's because Republicans and Democrats very much see the Russian invasion as a violation of the nation's sovereignty, which is protected by the UN Charter. But there's also enormous focus on the immense humanitarian cost, human cost of the war, which plays out every day on TV and online with all of our news sources. Some members might want greater action by the Biden administration. Perhaps some members want less, but they all stand united in continuing to stand with the Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian people, and in sanctioning Russia in an effort to increase pressure on the government to pull out of Ukraine. On Afghanistan, it's a little bit more complex. The hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan certainly inflamed partisan tensions here in Washington. But the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan is dire. The new Taliban government is incapable of governing, and they don't have the financial resources that the previous government had. They've been cut off from the West financially, but the needs remain: education, food, health. So the goal of what the U.S. is doing, and there's a lot of members of Congress that care about this as well, and they're focused on it intently, is to get funds flowing directly to the Afghan people. The UN has worked out a mechanism to do this, to pay educators and health workers without the money flowing to the Taliban. So the US and Congress are trying to support that initiative, but the situation remains dire. So those are the two big international buckets that Congress is focused on at the moment. Domestically, members are focused on the Build Back Better initiative that the president proposed. One element's already been done, which is a physical infrastructure package. So if you see your bridges and roads being reconstructed, that's with your taxpayer dollars supported by Republicans and Democrats in Congress. The second element, which is the sort of human element of Build Back Better, remains hung up. It lacks Republican support, but it also lacks support from a couple of key Democratic senators. They're trying to split it apart to move elements like the child tax credit that have bipartisan support. We'll see if that works, but time is running out for this Congress to take meaningful action. Anyways, that's what members of Congress are focused on. But just because the Hill is focused on other issues doesn't mean that we shouldn't be up there talking about malaria. In fact, it's the opposite. We need to make sure that our issue remains on the table while Congress is debating other issues. And that is what Tuesday is all about. And frankly, you all have a track record. You know, when there were proposals to cut global health funding in the Trump administration, because of your meetings and your calls and your letters, those were defeated. When there was an effort to increase funding for the president's malaria initiative last year, it was your work that made it all happen. So you have a track record of achieving the type of advocacy success that is absolutely essential to the malaria cause. And we fortunately have something new to tell them. The US is hosting the 7th replenishment of the Global Fund, which supports the most innovative and groundbreaking malaria work. And that's an honor to host a summit, but it's also a responsibility because the administration is, I think, committed to making sure that we make a robust pledge for the replenishment of the Global Fund so that we can fulfill our global responsibilities. But we will wait to see that that pledge needs to happen when the president makes his budget proposal later in the month or in April. And then we need to work to get Congress to appropriate the funds to fulfill that global pledge. And in fact, already 130 members of the House of Representatives have signed a letter to the administration demanding a strong start for this replenishment. So there is strong bipartisan support on Capitol Hill for the Global Fund, for the battle to beat malaria. And so I think our job is to not only educate them about the malaria battle, but also to get up their enthusiasm for a robust funding level for the Global Fund next year in the context of the Global Fund replenishment. The bipartisan support for malaria is real, and it's because of the work that you have done through the years to work with your members of Congress to educate them and ask them to assume leadership roles. And speaking of leaders, we're about to hear from the leaders in the House and Senate, Republicans and Democrats, of the Congressional Malaria Caucus. They have championed this issue, they have prioritized this issue, and we're really fortunate for their leadership. So we are truly a united front to end this disease. So again, thank you. Thank you for everything you've done to beat malaria. And I know Tuesday is going to be incredibly successful. See you next year in Washington.
Hello, I'm Senator Roger Wicker from Mississippi. Thank you for continuing the global fight against malaria. This deadly disease continues to affect millions around the world. Last October, after years of steady investment and research, we were finally able to celebrate the first malaria vaccine. This was a critical milestone that promises to help save lives. But we cannot take our eye off the ball. Today, especially in light of disruptions from the COVID-19 pandemic, we need to redouble our efforts to defeat malaria once and for all. 11 years ago, Senator Coons and I started the Senate Malaria and Neglected Tropical Disease Caucus to raise awareness and bipartisan support for these life-saving initiatives. This year, we are continuing to push for more malaria research through the Department of Defense. As we continue our work, your efforts make a difference. Thank you for staying the course in the fight to end malaria.
Hello, I'm Gregory Meeks, Chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and I stand proudly with Nothing But Nets champions from all over the country in continuing the crucial fight to defeat malaria and NTDs. With your help, we've averted over 1.7 billion cases and saved over 10.6 million lives just in the past 2 decades. This is a testament to the success of malaria programs. In fact, in countries where the Global Fund invests, malaria deaths have dropped by 45% since the Global Fund was founded in 2002. Although COVID-19 disruptions and other emerging challenges over the past few years have contributed to an increase in the tragic loss of lives, swift action from the United States leadership, including the President's Malaria Initiative and the Global Fund, prevented a worst-case scenario. 2022 is a significant year in the fight against malaria. In a strong show of support for this important program, President Biden will also host the Global Fund's 7th replenishment here in the United States. And the President's Malaria Initiative recently announced a new strategy to accelerate progress toward ending this disease. So again, thank you to everyone at Nothing But Nets and the UN Foundation for your engagement. Your advocacy is critical to the success of anti-malaria efforts, and I look forward to our continued work to keep up the good fight.
Wow, what an incredible day. Thank you to all of you for being with us as we unite to beat malaria. In case we haven't met, hi, my name is Megan Cross, and I am the Grassroots Advocacy Associate at United to Beat Malaria.
And my name is Wendy Demas, and I'm the Senior Officer of Grassroots Advocacy at United to Beat Malaria. On behalf of our team, I'm honored to reveal our final puzzle piece, you. That's right, you. Your voice, your commitment, and your passion are critical as we each do the work to beat malaria. We know that eradicating malaria will be no small feat. It will require extraordinary commitment, collaboration, and innovation from all aspects of society.
That's right. We all have a role to play to beat malaria once and for all. By each of you doing your part, whether it's raising awareness or funds, advocating to policymakers, or activating your community and colleagues, these actions add up to tremendous collective impact. With the support of your advocacy efforts, together we have made significant progress. 10.6 million lives have been saved. 1.7 billion cases have been averted, and over 20 countries have reached 0 cases of malaria in the last 2 decades.
That's impressive. And this year is critical for the malaria community. PMI recently launched their strategy for 2021 to 2026, and the Global Fund is gearing up for its 7th replenishment, which will be hosted in the US this fall. That's why now, more than ever, it's critical for each of you to join our advocacy activations in 2022. As we look beyond Summit, our next opportunity to support malaria elimination programs is on April 25th for World Malaria Day. As we lead into this date, our team will share petitions for you to sign in support of malaria elimination programs. In addition to signing petitions, we'll also share social media assets for you to easily share and raise your voice in support of these life-saving programs.
Other opportunities for each of us to raise our voices will happen in the summer and fall. Our team will continue to lead trainings and share resources that make advocacy accessible to you. These opportunities will be a mix of digital actions and meetings. In June, we will lead a digital activation similar to World Malaria Day with an opportunity for social media engagement and petition signatures. And we will again meet with members of Congress around World Mosquito Day to raise our voice in support of the Global Fund.
Malaria programs like PMI and the Global Fund do more than save lives. They help build more stable economies, workforces. They lead to fewer missed school days and work days. They foster stronger relationships with the United States, and this year is critical as we empower health systems to best respond to infectious disease outbreaks like COVID-19. Given the current environment, reaching elimination will require a renewed effort from each of us. So as we prepare for our Hill group training tomorrow and our meetings on Tuesday, remember that your presence will bring us closer to being the generation to end malaria for good.
So, as this year's summit comes to a close, here are a few reminders for those of you who made the commitment to meet with your member of Congress on Tuesday. To start, be sure to log into your meeting portal tonight. Practice reading your script out loud a few times, and be sure to join your UN Foundation staff tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Eastern to prepare for your meetings on Tuesday. You've received the link to tomorrow's training via email and text message.
For Tuesday's meetings, you'll access your meetings and script via the Advocacy Associates portal. Be sure to log into your meetings 10 minutes early. It's truly an honor to get to partner with each of you as we each do our part to end this historic injustice and unite to beat malaria once and for all.
Thanks so much, Wendy and Megan, and really to the entire United to Beat Malaria team who has worked so hard to both pull together this summit and the launch of our new brand. I couldn't be more proud and excited. And now for the surprise we've all been waiting for. We're really excited to share that the President of the United States, Joe Biden, sent a special message to each of you. As you'll see, he starts by sending warm greetings to all summit participants and affirms that, quote, "The United States stands firm in our belief that in order to deliver for our own people, we must also engage deeply with the rest of the world," end quote. President Biden acknowledges that much progress has been made, but that there's still much more work to be done. As he says, quote, "Our common fight is not just about malaria itself. It is about taking steps towards achieving universal access to health care, advancing child survival, and mitigating the impacts of climate change," end quote. He articulates support for the President's Malaria Initiative and pride in the U.S. hosting the Global Fund Replenishment Conference later this year. His message ends with, quote, "Organizations like Nothing But Nets are helping us lead the way toward a safer, healthier, and more equitable future. I urge the global community to join our efforts to end malaria within our lifetime. Your continued support, advocacy, and dedication are a crucial part of this fight. With the commitment of passionate individuals like you, I am confident that we can end malaria once and for all. Keep the faith," end quote. Beautifully said, Mr. President. To all our supporters, I hope that this summit has strengthened your belief that together we can be the generation to beat malaria for good. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon.
Hey, yeah. Malaria, malaria, it's time to go. Yeah. It's time to go. Malaria, malaria, we'll get you down to zero. We'll get you down. Yeah, we clapping together. Clapping together. Chase you away. Chase you away. A simple dance and a simple clap will go a long way. Listen, Corona, Corona. You won't fool us, we see the bigger picture, big picture. Without you, so keep fighting malaria. Malaria, yeah. Even as you fight us, you fight back. Fight us. I say, oh yeah, Corona, Corona. You won't fool us, we'll keep fighting malaria. Malaria. Even as you fight us, you fight back. As you fight us, you fight back. Hold it, somebody give me a clap.